For 730 days, my daughter-in-law Brittany looked me in the eye and told me my son was living the dream in Dubai. She drove his Porsche to my house for Sunday dinners. She wore new diamonds that she claimed he sent her. She showed me emails from him detailing his massive success in the Middle East. I believed her because a father wants to believe his son is conquering the world. I was a fool. The truth wasn't in Dubai. The truth was handed to me in a parking lot by a terrified delivery driver holding a package that smelled like despair. Inside that cardboard box was not a souvenir. It was a dirty burner phone and a scrap of toilet paper that would unravel a $5 million heist and send the person I trusted most to federal prison. Before I tell you how I used my 40 years of experience as a postmaster to bring down a monster, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight to save a family member who couldn't save themselves. My name is Reggie. I am 71 years old, and until last Tuesday, I thought my retirement would be spent gardening and waiting for my son Nash to come home. I was standing at the farmer's market on 4th Street, squeezing a tomato to check for ripeness. The morning air was crisp, the kind of Tuesday that feels ordinary. I was thinking about making a marinara sauce, maybe freezing some for when Nash finally returned from his contract. That was when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a friendly tap. It was a grip, urgent and shaking. I turned around to see a brown uniform I knew better than my own reflection. It was Marcus. I had hired Marcus 20 years ago when I was running the downtown distribution center. He was a good kid then, and he was a good man now, but today he looked like he had seen a ghost. Sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool breeze. He wasn't parked in the loading zone. His delivery truck was idling haphazardly against the curb engine, running hazard lights flashing. Mr. King Marcus whispered, his eyes darting around the market crowd as if he expected to be tackled by security. "I need you to take this, right now. Don't look at it here. Just take it." He shoved a package into my chest. It was light, maybe less than a pound, wrapped in standard brown shipping paper that was torn in 3 places. But it was the condition of the box that made my stomach turn. It looked like it had been through a war zone. It was crushed on one corner and stained with something dark that looked suspiciously like dried grease or maybe old blood. "Marcus, what is going on?" I asked, my voice dropping to match his volume. "I haven't been your boss for 6 years. You can't just hand off mail to a civilian. You know the protocols." "Screw the protocols," Mr. King Marcus hissed, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "This is the 3rd time this package came through my route. It is addressed to your son's house, to Brittany. Every single time I tried to deliver it, she refused it. She didn't just say return to sender. She looked at it like it was a bomb. She told me to mark it as trash and destroy it. She said it was junk mail from a stalker." I looked down at the package. My old instincts kicked in. The label was handwritten. The ink was smudged but legible. The handwriting was jagged, erratic, as if written by someone whose hand was shaking uncontrollably. But I knew that loop on the letter K. I had taught a little boy how to write that K 40 years ago at a kitchen table. "This is Nash's handwriting," I said, the tomato falling from my other hand and rolling unnoticed under a table. "That is why I couldn't destroy it," Marcus said, stepping back toward his truck. "I know his writing, too. I remember when he used to come to the station after school. Mr. King, that package didn't come from Dubai. It came from the sanctuary, the rehab center out on Route 9. It was in the drop box. No return address. Just open it alone. If she finds out I gave this to you, I lose my pension. Please." Marcus didn't wait for an answer. He jumped back into his truck and sped off, leaving me standing there with a crushed box that felt suddenly heavier than lead. The noise of the market faded away. The laughter of children, the haggling over prices, the music from a nearby radio, it all became a distant buzz. All I could see were the red stamps plastered all over the box. Refused. Return to sender. Undeliverable. My daughter-in-law had refused a package from her husband 3 times. She had ordered it destroyed. I didn't finish my shopping. I walked to my Ford F-150, parked in the back lot, my knees feeling stiff, not from age, but from a sudden creeping dread. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. The tint on my windows gave me a sense of privacy, but I still felt exposed. I placed the package on the passenger seat. My hands, usually steady as a surgeon's, were trembling. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out my pocket knife. I sliced through the layers of packing tape. The cardboard groaned as I pried it open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of the desert or expensive cologne. It was the smell of mildew and stale cafeteria food. Inside, nestled in a bed of shredded newspaper, was a phone. It wasn't Nash's sleek iPhone. It was an old black Nokia brick phone, the kind you buy at a convenience store for $20. It was scuffed and dirty. Taped to the back of the phone with a piece of chewing gum was a note. I picked up the note. It wasn't paper. It was a square of rough institutional toilet paper. The writing was faint, done in pencil, the graphite digging deep into the soft tissue. Dad, help me. Not Dubai. Hell. She put me here. Don't trust her. Code is 1985. I read it 3 times. The words swam before my eyes. Not Dubai. She put me here. The world tilted on its axis. For 2 years, Brittany had been showing me photos. She had read me messages. She had told me detailed stories about Nash's business expansion in the Emirates. Every single word had been a lie. I picked up the phone. It was dead. I pressed the power button, praying for a spark. Nothing. I frantically searched the box. Buried under the newspaper shreds was a battery separated from the unit. Smart. That stopped the phone from being tracked or ringing during transit. I snapped the battery in. The screen flickered to life with a pale blue glow. I entered the code. 1985. The year Nash was born. The phone unlocked. There were no contacts. No recent calls. Just one saved voice recording. My finger hovered over the play button. I was terrified of what I was about to hear. I took a deep breath, the air in the truck cabin feeling hot and suffocating, and pressed play. The sound that filled the cab of my truck will haunt me until my dying day. It started with heavy breathing, ragged, wet gasps. Then a voice. It was Nash, but it sounded like he was speaking through a mouthful of cotton. Dad, if you get this, you have to listen. I don't have much time. The orderly is coming back in 10 minutes. Brittany, she didn't just send me away. She owns the doctors here. I'm not sick, Dad. I'm drugged. She threatened to tell the feds I was embezzling if I didn't sign the power of attorney. I was scared. I signed it. I thought it was just for a month while I cleared my head. That was 2 years ago. There was a sound of metal clanging in the background, followed by a scream from somewhere distant. Nash's voice dropped to a terrified whisper. She sold the house, didn't she? She told me she sold the lake house. Dad, check the accounts, check everything. I'm at the sanctuary, but they keep me in the basement level. I'm not Nash King here. I'm patient 304. Don't come here asking for me. They will say I'm insane. They will say I'm violent. You have to be smart. She has people watching you too. Oh God, he's coming. The recording ended with a fumble and a click. I sat there in silence. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor mat. My vision blurred, hot tears stinging my eyes. But they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of pure, molten rage. Patient 304. I looked out the windshield. A woman in a business suit walked by, laughing into her phone. The world kept turning oblivious to the fact that my son was being held prisoner 50 miles away while his wife spent his fortune. I remembered last Sunday. Brittany had sat at my dining table eating my roast beef. She had smiled when I asked about Nash. She said, "He misses you so much, Dad. He's working so hard for our future." She had looked me in the eye. She had toasted to family. I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. I wasn't just a retired old man anymore. I was a father who had just been handed a weapon. Brittany thought she was smart. She thought she had buried her husband in a hole and distracted his senile father with fairy tales. But she forgot one thing. She forgot that before I was a retiree, I was the man who managed the logistics for the entire Eastern District. I knew how to track things. I knew how to find things. And I knew exactly how to deliver a message that no one could refuse. I reached for my own phone, the modern one. I didn't dial 911. The local police chief went to high school with Brittany. They played tennis together. Nash said she had people watching. I couldn't trust the badge. I scrolled down my contact list until I found a name I hadn't called in 3 years. Booker. Booker was an ex-Marine who now worked night security at the impound lot. He didn't play tennis. He didn't care about social status. And he owed me a favor from the time I kept his son out of federal prison for a mail tampering charge. The phone rang twice. "Yeah." Booker's voice was gravel and smoke. "Booker, it's Reggie," I said, my voice steady, cold, unrecognizable even to myself. "Mr. King." "Everything all right. You sound like you're in a trench. I need you to meet me. Bring your bolt cutters. And bring that laptop you use for the stuff we don't talk about." There was a pause, a long silence. Then Booker spoke, his tone shifting from casual to combat ready. "Where and when?" "My place. Come through the back alley." And Booker, "Yeah, if you see a silver Mercedes parked down the street, don't stop. Just circle the block. We are going to war." I hung up. I looked at the dirty Nokia phone one last time, then shoved it into my jacket pocket. I started the engine. The dashboard clock read 10:15 a.m. By dinner time, I was going to know exactly how much of my life had been stolen. And tomorrow the delivery man was coming for Brittany. And this time, she wouldn't be able to return the package. I parked my truck around the corner from the villa. I needed a moment to compose myself before walking into the lion's den. The dirty Nokia phone was burning a hole in my jacket pocket, a heavy, silent secret that made my heart hammer against my ribs. I looked in the rearview mirror. My face looked gray, older than my 71 years. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my windbreaker. I had to be the Reggie they expected, the harmless, slightly confused grandfather, the retiree whose biggest worry was the price of tomatoes. If Brittany suspected for 1 second that I held the key to her destruction in my pocket, she would shut down access to everything. I had to play the part. I had to smile while I bled internally. Walking up the driveway of my son's house felt like walking onto a movie set. The lawn was manicured to an inch of its life. There were expensive cars parked in a row, a parade of German engineering that belonged to Brittany's friends. I could hear the laughter before I even rang the bell. It was the sound of expensive champagne and carefree ignorance. I used my key, the one she hadn't taken back yet, and stepped inside. The smell of grilled steak and expensive perfume hit me instantly. The house was open plan, designed to impress, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the pool. And there she was, Brittany. She was holding a flute of champagne, wearing a white sundress that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. She was surrounded by 3 other women, all laughing at something she had just said. "Oh, look who it is," Brittany announced, her voice pitching up an octave into that fake sweet tone she reserved for me when an audience was present. "It is Grandpa Reggie. We didn't think you were coming, Dad. I thought Tuesday was your bingo night." She stepped forward and offered her cheek. I kissed the air beside it, smelling the sharp scent of alcohol and ambition. "I decided to skip bingo," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "I wanted to see how you were doing, and to hear if there was any news from Nash." The air in the room shifted slightly. The other women looked at Brittany with sympathetic eyes. She sighed, a practiced, tragic exhale that was perfect for the stage. "Oh, Dad, you know how hard he is working. The time difference in Dubai is brutal. He is 12 hours ahead. When we are awake, he is sleeping. When we sleep, he is building his empire. He is exhausted, poor thing. But look what he sent me to make up for missing our anniversary." She held out her wrist. The women gasped in unison. Draped over her tanned skin was a thick diamond-encrusted bracelet. It glittered aggressively under the recessed lighting. "He had it custom-made in the gold souk in Dubai," Brittany bragged, turning her wrist so the light caught every angle. "He said the diamonds there are purer than anything you can get in the States." "Isn't he the best husband?" I stepped closer. My eyes narrowed. "I spent 40 years in the Postal Service. I didn't just move boxes, I inspected them. I knew customs forms, origin stamps, and I knew merchandise catalogs better than anyone." I looked at the clasp of the bracelet. It was a unique double-locking mechanism shaped like a figure 8. I had seen that exact clasp 2 days ago. It was on the back cover of the Lux American Jewelers catalog that I had delivered to Mrs. Higgins on Elm Street. It wasn't from a market in Dubai. It was from a warehouse in Ohio. It was mass-produced, domestic luxury retail price, $4,000. "It is beautiful," I said quietly. "When did it arrive?" "Just this morning," Brittany beamed. "Special courier." "That is strange," I said, keeping my voice full of innocent wonder. "International priority from the Emirates usually takes 3 days minimum for customs clearance, and they always use those red diplomatic pouches. I didn't see any DHL trucks in the neighborhood this morning." Brittany's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Her eyes hardened, a flash of annoyance crossing her face before the mask slipped back into place. "Well, Dad, I don't know the logistics. I just know my husband loves me. Maybe he used a private jet service. You know how Nash is." She turned her back on me, dismissing my question as the rambling of an old man, and turned back to her friends. So anyway, as I was saying, we are thinking of redoing the pool tiles next month. My stomach churned. She was lying effortlessly. She was spending Nash's money on domestic jewelry and claiming it was a gift from overseas to keep up the charade. If she was lying about the bracelet, she was lying about everything. I need to use the restroom, I mumbled, backing away. Oh, down the hall, Dad. Brittany waved a hand without looking at me. Try not to make a mess. I walked down the hallway past the guest bathroom and kept going. My heart was pounding in my ears. I needed evidence. The phone in my pocket was a cry for help, but it wasn't proof of financial crime. I needed paper. I reached the door to Nash's home office. It was closed. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a thin metal shim I used to use to open stuck mailboxes. It was a trick Booker had taught me years ago. I slid it between the door and the frame, wiggling it gently. The lock was a cheap interior privacy lock, not a deadbolt. With a soft click, it gave way. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The room smelled of stale air and dust. It was dark, the blinds drawn tight. I pulled my small flashlight from my keychain. The first thing I noticed was the desk. Nash was a messy worker. He always had stacks of papers, coffee cups, and chaotic notes. But the desk was empty. I ran a finger across the mahogany surface. It came away gray with dust. I shone the light on his computer keyboard. Thick dust settled between the keys. No one had typed on this machine in months. If Nash was managing a business empire remotely, he wasn't doing it from his home server. Then I turned the light to the corner of the room. The large steel floor safe. It was clean. There was no dust on the keypad, no dust on the handle. In a room that had been neglected for months, the safe was the only thing being touched. Brittany wasn't coming in here to clean. She was coming in here to take cash. I moved to the trash can. It was empty, lined with a fresh bag. Smart girl. She didn't leave scraps. I scanned the room, desperate. My eyes landed on the shredder. It was full. I couldn't reconstruct shredded paper in 5 minutes. I looked at the bookshelf. Nothing out of place. Then I saw it. Tucked underneath the heavy printer in the corner as if it had slid there by accident. A crumpled piece of thermal paper. A receipt. I knelt down, my knees popping, and pulled it out. It was a courier receipt, but not for a delivery. It was for a pickup. Date yesterday. Sender Brittany King. Recipient Dr. A. Vance. Location the sanctuary. Content care package. Level 4 restricted. I stared at the address for the sanctuary. It wasn't an international code. The zip code started with 48, just like ours. I closed my eyes and visualized the postal map in my head. That zip code belonged to the heavily wooded area up north past the reservoir. 50 miles away. 50 miles. My son wasn't 7,000 miles away in the desert. He was less than an hour's drive from where I stood. I looked at the line item on the receipt, level 4 restricted. In postal terms, restricted delivery meant high security. Prisons, mental wards, witness protection. She was sending him care packages. That meant she knew exactly where he was. She was maintaining him there, paying for him to be kept there. I heard footsteps in the hallway, the click-clack of high heels on the hardwood floor. Dad, are you in there? Brittany's voice was sharp, suspicious. I shoved the receipt into my pocket right next to the burner phone. 2 pieces of the puzzle. I stood up, flushed the toilet in the adjacent bathroom loudly, and stepped out of the office, pulling the door shut behind me just as Brittany turned the corner. I was wiping my hands on my trousers, looking confused. I got turned around, I said, making my voice sound shaky. I was looking for the bathroom, but I think I opened the linen closet by mistake. Brittany stared at me. Her eyes dropped to the office door, then back to my face. She was analyzing me, looking for a crack in the facade. I let my mouth hang open slightly, giving her the vacant look she expected to see. "The bathroom is the other way, Dad," she said slowly, like she was talking to a toddler. "Come on, let's get you a plate of food before you get lost again." She took my arm. Her grip was tight, bordering on painful. She was escorting me, not guiding me. She wanted me out of that hallway. We walked back to the party. The laughter was still loud. The champagne was still flowing. But the world had changed for me. The vibrant colors of the party looked gray. The expensive food looked like rot. I looked at the zip code on the receipt in my mind's eye again. The sanctuary. I knew exactly where I was going tomorrow. And I wasn't going to bring a care package. I was bringing a sledgehammer to this glass house she had built. I let her lead me to the buffet. I let her put a scoop of potato salad on my plate. I looked at her diamond bracelet, the fake gift from a fake life. "Thank you, dear," I said. "You are so good to me." "Enjoy it, Dad," she said, turning away to refill her glass. I watched her walk away. I took a bite of the potato salad. It tasted like ash. I wasn't going to eat. I needed my hunger. I needed the anger. I checked my watch. Booker would be getting off his shift in 2 hours. I was going to drain my bank account. I was going to buy black clothes, and I was going to find out what level 4 restricted meant, even if I had to tear that facility apart brick by brick. The time for being a father was over. It was time to be a soldier again. I left Brittany's villa with the taste of ash in my mouth and a burning secret in my pocket. The burner phone felt heavy against my ribs, a constant reminder that my son was rotting in a cell while his wife drank champagne. But anger without resources is just noise, and I needed resources. I needed to hire a private investigator, someone who could bypass the local police and dig into the operations of the sanctuary. Good investigators cost money, usually up front and in cash. I had saved for 40 years. I had a joint investment account with Nash, a safety net we had built together after his mother passed. It was supposed to be for his future children, or my long-term care. I drove straight to the First National Bank on Main Street, intending to withdraw $10,000. The bank was quiet, the air conditioning humming with that specific sterile silence that smells of money and floor polish. I walked up to the teller window. It was Mrs. Gable, a woman I had known for 15 years. She smiled when she saw me, but her eyes darted to my rumpled clothes. I realized I must have looked frantic, a far cry from the composed postmaster she was used to serving. "Good afternoon, Mr. King," she said, her voice professional but warm. "How can we help you today? I need to make a withdrawal." "Mrs. Gable," I said, sliding my debit card and ID across the marble counter. $10,000. Small bills, if possible." She nodded and began typing. I watched her fingers dance across the keyboard. I was already mentally calculating how long that money would last if I had to go into hiding with Nash. I was planning the logistics, mapping out routes, thinking 3 steps ahead. Then the typing stopped. Mrs. Gable frowned at her screen. She tapped a few more keys harder this time, as if she could force the computer to change its mind. She leaned closer to the monitor, her brow furrowing. Then she looked at me. The warmth was gone from her face, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated pity. That look terrified me more than a gun in my face ever could. "Mr. King," she said softly, lowering her voice so the customers behind me wouldn't hear. "Is there another account you wanted to draw from?" "No," I said, confusion clouding my mind. "The joint investment savings, the one ending in 402. Mrs. Gable swallowed hard. She turned the screen slightly away from me, a defensive gesture. "Mr. King, that account has a balance of $42.16. The world stopped. The hum of the air conditioner dropped away. My ears started to ring. "That is impossible," I said, my voice sounding hollow and distant. "There was over $400,000 in that account. It is my life savings, my pension lump sum." "Check again." "I have checked 3 times, she whispered. "The funds were withdrawn 6 months ago. A cashier's check for the full balance. Withdrawn by whom?" I demanded, gripping the edge of the counter. My knuckles turned white. "I didn't authorize a transfer. I haven't been in this bank in a year." Mrs. Gable looked at the screen, reading the notes. It was withdrawn by Mrs. Brittany King. She presented a notarized power of attorney document signed by Mr. Nash King, who is the primary account holder. The transaction note says... She squinted at the text. It says real estate investment, commercial development. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees buckled and I had to lean heavily on the counter to keep from collapsing. It wasn't just the money, it was the mechanism of the theft. Nash had access to the account because I trusted him. He was my son. When he got married, I didn't remove him because I thought what is mine is his. But Brittany, she had forced him to sign that power of attorney. She had used his hand to rob me. 6 months ago. That timeline matched perfectly. That was right around the time she claimed Nash had extended his contract in Dubai. That was when she stopped inviting me over as often. She hadn't just imprisoned my husband, she had liquidated my existence. She had stripped me of my armor before I even knew I was in a war. Investment. I repeated the word, tasting like bile. "She told you it was an investment." "Yes, sir," Mrs. Gable said, looking like she wanted to cry. "She said it was a surprise for you. A new property development." A surprise. Yes, it was definitely a surprise. I stood there, a 71-year-old man with $42 to his name. My house was gone, sold out from under me. My savings were gone, drained by a predator with a smile. I had no money for a lawyer, no money for a private investigator, no money to even bribe an orderly at the sanctuary. I was naked in the middle of a battlefield. Mr. King, Mrs. Gable reached out a hand. Do you want me to call the branch manager? We can start a fraud investigation, but if the power of attorney was valid... I looked at her. I knew the law. If Nash signed it even under duress, it would take months, maybe years to prove fraud in civil court. By then, Nash would be dead from an accidental overdose in that facility, and I would be in a state-run nursing home. Brittany had calculated this perfectly. She knew the legal system better than she knew her own heart. She counted on me being slow. She counted on me being polite. She counted on me following the rules. No, I said, straightening my back. I forced my posture to return to the rigid stance of a federal employee. No manager. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. I must have forgotten. My memory isn't what it used to be. I walked out of the bank. The sunshine outside felt offensive. People were walking by, eating sandwiches, laughing, living their lives. They didn't know that a monster was living in the villa on the hill. They didn't know that you could work for 40 years carrying mail through snow and rain, saving every penny only to have it vanish with a single signature. I got into my truck. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there and stared at my hands. They were old hands, scarred from paper cuts and parcel wire. They were empty. I let myself feel the fear for exactly 10 seconds. I counted them down. 10. 9. The panic of poverty. 8. 7. The terror of failing my son. 6. 5. The humiliation of being outsmarted. Then at 0, I shut it off. I didn't have money. Fine. I didn't have the law. Fine. But I had something Brittany didn't account for. I had the streets. I had the knowledge of how things moved in the dark. I wasn't going to hire a professional to find the truth. I was going to steal the truth. I pulled out my phone and dialed Booker again. You said we are going to war. Booker answered on the first ring. I'm packing the gear. What is the target? Change of plans, Booker? I said, my voice dropping to a low growl. We aren't doing surveillance. I can't afford a camera crew. I can't afford a tank of gas. She took it all. Booker. Every dime. There was a silence on the line, then the sound of a heavy metal object being racked. So what do we need? Booker asked. I need the old bag, I said. The one you used when you were working repossession in Detroit. You mean the breach kit? Booker asked. I mean the lock picks, the bolt cutters, and the signal jammer, I said. I am coming to pick you up. We aren't going to knock on the door of that facility, Booker. We are going to break in, and if anyone gets in my way, God help them, because I have nothing left to lose. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, a rough, angry sound. I wasn't Reginald King, the retired postmaster, anymore. I was a father who had been backed into a corner. And as anyone in the animal kingdom knows, that is when you are most dangerous. I pulled out into traffic, cutting off a Lexus. I didn't care. Let them honk. I was on a mission. Brittany wanted to play games with money and paper fine. I was about to change the game to steel and iron. The drive to the sanctuary took us away from the paved confidence of the city limits and deep into the brooding silence of the pine forests. The GPS on Booker's battered dashboard flickered in and out of service as we wound our way up the narrow 2-lane road. The trees here were old and thick, their branches interlocking overhead to block out the midday sun, creating a perpetual twilight that felt less like nature and more like a warning. I sat in the passenger seat, gripping the door handle. My old postal badge was in my pocket. I had dug it out of a shoebox in my closet, wiping away 5 years of dust. It was expired. It was technically invalid, but it still had the federal eagle on it, and to most people that eagle meant authority. Booker slowed the truck as the trees suddenly cleared, revealing a massive iron gate flanked by stone pillars. There was no sign that said hospital or rehab, just a discreet bronze plaque that read, "The Sanctuary." It didn't look like a place for healing. It looked like a fortress designed to keep the world out, or worse, to keep secrets in. 10-foot walls topped with sensors stretched into the woods on either side. Cameras with red blinking eyes swiveled on the gateposts, tracking our approach. This is not a clinic, Reggie Booker muttered, stopping the truck 50 yards back. This is a vault. Look at those cameras. They are military grade. Motion sensors. Infrared. I squinted through the windshield. Booker was right. I had delivered mail to federal prisons that had less perimeter security than this place. If Nash was in there, he wasn't a patient. He was an inmate. "Park here," I said, my voice tight. "Keep the engine running. If I am not back in 15 minutes, you leave. You don't come in after me. You go straight to the federal building downtown and you find Inspector Davis." Booker looked at me, his jaw set. "I am not leaving you, Reggie. Just do it." "Booker," I snapped, "I need to know you are the failsafe. Now let me do what I do best. I deliver the message." I stepped out of the truck. The air up here was thinner, colder. I zipped up my windbreaker and walked toward the pedestrian intercom. I didn't buzz. I didn't ask for permission. I stood directly in front of the camera, pulled out my badge, and held it up to the lens. I waited. I counted to 10. The speaker crackled. "Can I help you, sir?" a voice asked, polite but guarded. "Federal mail inquiry." I barked, channeling the voice I used to use when I caught employees stealing checks. "I have a priority package that has been flagged for suspicious routing regarding one of your residents. Open the gate. Now." There was a long pause. The silence of the forest pressed in on me. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I kept my face stone cold. I was betting everything on the fact that private security guards are terrified of interfering with federal mail investigations. It is a felony to obstruct a postal inspector. They knew that. Or at least I hoped they did. The buzzer sounded a harsh grinding noise. The pedestrian gate clicked unlock. I walked through. The path to the main building was lined with perfectly manicured hedges, a stark contrast to the wild forest outside. The building itself was a sprawling mansion of glass and steel, beautiful and cold. I didn't stop to admire the architecture. I marched straight to the glass double doors and pushed them open. The lobby smelled of lavender and money. The floors were marble, so polished I could see my own reflection looking small and gray in my cheap jacket. Behind a massive reception desk sat a young woman. She was beautiful, impeccable, wearing a headset and typing on a sleek computer. She looked up as I approached her, smile practiced and hollow. "Sir, you cannot just walk in here." She started reaching for a phone. I slapped my badge onto the marble counter. The sound echoed through the silent lobby like a gunshot. "Put the phone down, miss," I said. "My name is Inspector King. We have a situation regarding undeliverable certified mail addressed to a Mr. Nash King at this facility. The packages have been refused 3 times. That is a flag for potential identity fraud. Now I need you to verify if the recipient is physically capable of signing for these documents, or if someone is interfering with federal correspondence." The young woman froze. Her hand hovered over the phone. She looked at the badge, then at me. The word fraud did exactly what I wanted it to do. It scared her. People in these places are used to dealing with angry relatives, not federal inquiries. I don't have a Nash King in our public directory," she stammered. I leaned in closer. My eyes locked onto hers. I wasn't acting anymore. I was a father looking for his son. "Don't lie to me," I said quietly. "I tracked the GPS coordinates of the courier pickup yesterday. He is here, and if you deny it, I will come back with a warrant and we will seize every computer in this building. Do you want to be the one explaining that to your boss?" She swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled as she typed on her keyboard. She wasn't looking at the guest list anymore. She was accessing the secure internal database. I watched her eyes scan the screen. I saw them widen. "Mr. King he is in the north wing," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But sir, I can't let you see him. I can't even confirm he is here officially." "Why?" I asked. "Is he in a coma? Is he dead?" "No," she said, glancing nervously at the security camera in the corner of the lobby. "He is listed as level red, restricted access." "What does level red mean?" I demanded. "It means complete isolation. No visitors, no phone calls, no mail. All communication is filtered through the legal guardian. And who is the guardian?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The name tasted like poison in my mouth before she even said it. "Brittany King," she read from the screen. "She has medical power of attorney. Sir, the notes here. They say the patient is delusional and violent. It says he is a danger to himself." Violent. My son, who used to cry when he stepped on a bug. My son who wouldn't hunt deer with me because he couldn't stand the sight of blood. "Thank you," I said, snatching my badge back. "You have been very helpful." I turned to leave. I had what I needed. Nash was alive. He was here, and he was being held in solitary confinement under the guise of medical care. But I couldn't stay. I saw two large men in suits emerging from a door behind the reception desk. Security. I walked fast. I didn't run. Running makes you look guilty. Walking fast makes you look busy. I pushed through the glass doors back into the cold air. I could feel the eyes of the security guards burning into my back. I expected a hand on my shoulder, a taser in my spine, but they didn't follow me past the gate. They were watching, logging my face, probably calling the police, but they stayed inside their golden cage. I climbed back into the truck. "Go," I told Booker. "Drive." Booker hit the gas, the tires spinning on the gravel as we peeled away from the gate. "Did you find him?" Booker asked, checking the rear-view mirror. "He is there," I said, staring out the window as the trees blurred past. "Level red. That means chemical restraints, Booker. They are keeping him drugged so he can't talk. She has him buried alive." We drove in silence for a minute, the weight of the discovery settling over us. The road twisted back down toward the highway. I reached for my seatbelt, trying to stop my hands from shaking. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a shrill ringing sound. It wasn't the burner phone. It was my personal cell phone. I looked at the screen. The name flashing there made my blood turn to ice. Brittany. I stared at it. How did she know I hadn't called her? I hadn't used my credit card. "Answer it," Booker said tightly. "Put it on speaker." I swiped the green button. "Hello, Dad." Brittany's voice purred through the speaker. It was smooth, calm, terrifying. "What do you want, Brittany?" I asked. "I was just wondering," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "How is the weather up in the mountains today? The forecast said it might rain near the reservoir." I froze. I looked around the cab of the truck. "You know, Dad?" she continued, her voice dropping a register, becoming harder. "You really shouldn't be driving so far at your age. People get lost in those woods, and sometimes they don't find their way back." "How do you know where I am?" I whispered. "Oh, Reggie, you are driving. The Ford, aren't you? The one Nash bought for you? Did you really think I wouldn't put a tracker on an asset paid for with my husband's money? I know you visited Dr. Vance's clinic. I know you spoke to the receptionist." She paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "Go home, Dad. Go back to your sad little empty house. If you go near the sanctuary again, or if you try to talk to anyone about what you think you saw, I will have Nash transferred. I will move him to a facility in Mexico where they don't have visitor logs, and you will never, ever see him again. Do you understand me?" I didn't answer. I couldn't breathe. "Good talk, Dad," she said. The line went dead. I looked at Booker. He had heard every word. He pulled the truck over to the side of the road right there on the shoulder. "Get out," Booker said. "What?" "Get out of the truck." "Reggie." Now I scrambled out into the ditch. Booker crawled under the rear bumper of my truck. He pulled out a knife. A second later, he slid out, holding a small black box the size of a matchbook. It was blinking with a tiny green light. He threw it onto the asphalt and smashed it with the heel of his boot. He stomped on it until it was nothing but plastic shards and wires. "She knows," I said, leaning against the cold metal of the truck. "She knows everything." "No," Booker said, standing up and wiping the mud from his knees. "She thinks she knows everything. She thinks she just scared an old man into submission. She doesn't know she just declared war on the wrong people." Booker looked at me, his eyes fierce. "She is watching the truck, Reggie. So we are going to ditch the truck. We are going dark. If she wants to play spy games, let's show her how the old guard does it." I looked at the smashed tracker. Brittany thought she had won. She thought she had checkmated me. But she made a mistake. She revealed her hand. She showed me just how scared she was of the truth coming out. "Let's go," I said. "Drive me to your place. I am not going home tonight." As we merged back onto the highway, the rain began to fall, washing away the dust of the road. I felt a strange sense of calm. The uncertainty was gone. I knew where my son was. I knew who the enemy was. And now I knew that I had to become something I hadn't been in a long time. I had to become a ghost. The rain had started to fall harder by the time Booker dropped me off at the end of my street. I told him to keep his distance. If things went wrong, I didn't want him caught in the crossfire of a legal battle he couldn't afford. I pulled my collar up against the chill and walked the last 100 yards to the house that had been in my family for 3 generations. It was a modest brick colonial paid for with decades of overtime shifts and holiday bonuses. It was the only place in the world where I felt safe. But as I turned into the driveway, the safety evaporated. A sheriff's cruiser was parked diagonally across my lawn, its blue and red lights cutting through the rainy darkness, reflecting off the wet pavement like blood and bruises. The front door of my house, the door I had painted red just last summer, was wide open. My heart hammered against my ribs. I picked up my pace, ignoring the ache in my knees. Had she called in a burglary? Was this a trap? I reached the porch steps and stopped dead. Standing in my doorway was Brittany. She wasn't wearing the expensive dress from the party anymore. She was wrapped in a thick wool cardigan, clutching a mug of tea with both hands, looking small and fragile. Standing next to her with his thumbs hooked into his duty belt was Sheriff Miller. I knew Jim Miller. We had fished in the same circles years ago. He was a man who liked simple stories, and looking at the scene, I knew exactly what story he was being told. Reggie Miller said, his voice heavy with a mix of authority and pity. "Stop right there. Don't come any closer to the door." I froze, the rain dripping from the brim of my hat. "Jim, what is going on?" I asked, keeping my hands visible. "Why are you at my house, and why is she here?" Brittany let out a sob. It was a perfect, choked sound. She took a half step behind the sheriff as if she were afraid I might lunge at her. "Oh, Dad," she whimpered. "Thank God you're safe. We were so worried. You've been missing for hours." "Missing?" I scoffed, taking a step forward. "I went to the bank, Brittany, the bank where you stole every dime of my savings. And then I went to the sanctuary. I know where Nash is." Sheriff Miller held up a hand, palm out. The gesture was casual, but his other hand drifted near his holster. "Reggie, calm down," Miller said. "Mrs. King called us because she was concerned for your safety. She told us about your episodes." "Episodes," I repeated the word, tasting like acid. "I don't have episodes, Jim. I have a mortgage and a pension and a son who is being held prisoner by this woman." Brittany shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "See," she whispered to Miller. "He's doing it again. He thinks Nash is in prison. He thinks I'm stealing from him. It's just like Dr. Evans said. The paranoia is setting in." She reached into her oversized cardigan and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to the sheriff with a trembling hand. "Here is the diagnosis, Sheriff. We tried to keep it private. We didn't want to embarrass him. But when he started driving around looking for secret prisons today, I just couldn't take the risk of him hurting himself." Miller took the paper. He shined his flashlight on it. I could see the letterhead even from the bottom of the steps. It was from the City Medical Center. "I don't have dementia," I said, my voice rising. "That paper is a forgery, Jim. Look at the signature. I haven't seen a doctor in 6 months. She is lying to you. She is trying to discredit me because I found out she's keeping Nash drugged at a facility up north." Miller looked up from the paper. His eyes were sad, condescending. "The look you give a dog that needs to be put down. Reggie, this is signed by Dr. Evans. It dates back 3 weeks. It says here you have advanced stages of vascular dementia, aggressive outbursts, delusions of persecution." He folded the paper and handed it back to Brittany. "No," I shouted. "That is a lie. I have never been diagnosed with anything but high blood pressure." "Jim, listen to me." She emptied the joint account. "Check the bank records. Why would a dementia patient have access to clear out a $400,000 account?" She did it. Brittany stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Dad, we moved the money to a trust to protect it. You were giving it away to strangers on the internet. You forgot. Just like you forgot you gave us the keys to the house last week." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a key ring. My key ring. The one I kept on the hook by the door. "I checked the lock," Miller said. "The locks have been changed, Reggie. Mrs. King has the deed and the keys. She says you came here tonight and started banging on the door screaming about conspiracies." I looked at the door. The deadbolt was brand new, shiny brass against the weathered wood. She must have had a locksmith waiting the moment I drove away with Booker. "This is my house," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I built this porch. My name is on the deed." "Not anymore," Brittany said softly. "Nash has power of attorney, Dad, and I have power of attorney for Nash. We transferred the deed to the LLC last month to pay for your care." She looked at me, and for a split second the mask slipped. Her eyes weren't sad, they were cold, hard flint. She smiled, just a tiny curvature of her lips that only I could see. "I tried my key," I said to Miller. It didn't work. Because she changed it to keep me out. Jim, you can't let her do this. This is an illegal eviction. Miller sighed. He adjusted his belt. Look, Reggie, I don't know the ins and outs of your family finances. That is a civil matter. But right now I have a legal owner of this property telling me she feels threatened by a man with a documented history of mental instability. He stepped down one stair, closing the distance between us. I can't let you inside, Reggie. If you try to enter, I will have to arrest you for trespassing and disturbance of the peace. And given your condition, he gestured vaguely to the fake medical report, I would be obligated to take you to the psych ward at County General for a 72-hour hold. I stared at him. The injustice was suffocating. I was the victim here. I was the one who had been robbed. But because I was an angry black man shouting in the rain and she was a crying white woman in a cardigan, the law had already decided who was the threat. So what I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I just sleep on the street. In front of the house I paid for, Brittany spoke up. We booked a room for you, Dad, at the Motel 6 on the highway, paid for a week, just until we can get a bed open at the memory care center. Please, just go. You're scaring me. She buried her face in her hands again. Miller put a hand on my shoulder. It was meant to be comforting, but it felt like a shackle. Go to the motel, Reggie, he said. Sleep it off. Don't make me put cuffs on you. You're a good man. Don't end your night in a cell. I looked at Brittany. She was peeking through her fingers. Her eyes met mine. They said checkmate. She had stripped me of my money. She had imprisoned my son. And now she had taken my home and my name. If I fought Miller now, I would end up in the system. I would be medicated, labeled, and locked away just like Nash. No one would ever believe a word I said. I had to lose this battle to win the war. I took a deep breath, forcing my fists to unclench. The rain ran down my face, mixing with the sweat of fury. Fine, I said. I'll go. I stepped back. Miller relaxed visibly. That is the smart choice, Reggie, he said. I didn't look at him. I looked straight at Brittany. You think you are protecting him? I said loud enough for her to hear over the rain. But you aren't the only one who knows how to deliver a package, Brittany. She stiffened. Miller didn't catch the double meaning, but she did. I turned my back on my home. I walked down the driveway past the flashing lights of the cruiser. I didn't have my truck. I didn't have my coat. I walked into the darkness of the street. As I turned the corner, I pulled out the burner phone. It was dry in my inner pocket. I wasn't going to the Motel 6. That was where she expected me to go. That was where she would send someone to finish the job. I walked 3 blocks in the pouring rain until I reached the payphone outside the 7-Eleven. I didn't have any coins, but I didn't need them. I dialed a number I had memorized 30 years ago. Booker picked up on the first ring. She took the house, I said, and she has the sheriff in her pocket. I figured, Booker said. I am parked 2 blocks over. Get in. I climbed into Booker's rusted sedan. The heat was blasting. It smelled of stale cigarettes and loyalty. Where to? Booker asked. My apartment is gone, I said, wiping the water from my eyes. My bank account is gone. My reputation is gone. I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. It was 9:00 p.m. Take me to the impound lot, Booker. I need a place to sleep where no one will look for a retired postmaster. And tomorrow morning... I paused, looking at my hands. They were shaking not from cold but from adrenaline. Tomorrow morning we aren't going to the police. We are going to the federal building. She committed mail fraud to fake those documents. She used the U.S. Postal Service to facilitate a crime. And that makes it federal. Booker grinned, shifting the car into gear. Now you're talking, boss. I looked back one last time in the direction of my house. I could imagine Brittany locking the door, sipping her tea, thinking it was over. She thought she had evicted an old man. She didn't realize she had just evicted the only person who could have saved her from what was coming. I closed my eyes. The image of Nash drugged and tied to a bed burned behind my eyelids. Hold on, son, I whispered. The mailman is coming, and I always deliver. The sofa in Booker's apartment smelled of stale cigarette smoke and something that reminded me of wet dog, even though Booker hadn't owned a dog in 20 years. The springs were shot digging into my back through the thin fabric, serving as a physical reminder of exactly how far I had fallen in the span of 12 hours. I lay there in the dark, staring at a water stain on the ceiling that looked like a jagged map of a country that didn't exist. Outside, the sounds of the city were different here. In my neighborhood, the night was defined by the hum of pool filters and the occasional passing luxury sedan. Here it was the sound of sirens, shouting matches in the alleyway, and the constant low-frequency thrum of bass from a car stereo parked too close to the window. I was 71 years old. I was a retired postmaster. I had a credit score of 820. I had never missed a mortgage payment. And yet here I was, wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket that Booker had pulled out of a mothball-filled closet, homeless and destitute. The humiliation wasn't a sharp pain like the anger I felt earlier. It was a dull, heavy ache in my chest. It was the feeling of being erased. Brittany hadn't just taken my money. She had stripped away the dignity I had spent a lifetime accumulating. I closed my eyes, but sleep was impossible. Every time I drifted off, I saw Nash's face. Not the Nash on the video, drugged and terrified, but the Nash from 30 years ago. I saw him in our driveway, straddling a bicycle that was slightly too big for him. He was crying because he had scraped his knee. I remembered standing over him, arms crossed. I didn't hug him. I didn't wipe his tears. I told him to get up. I told him that crying didn't fix the bike and it didn't fix the knee. I told him that the world didn't care about his pain, so he better learn to ride through it. I turned over on the lumpy sofa, a wave of guilt washing over me so strong it almost made me gag. Had I done this? Had I been so hard on him, so focused on making him a strong black man who could survive in a world that would always judge him, that I had actually broken him? Had I raised a son who was so desperate for approval, so terrified of conflict, that he would let a woman like Brittany take over his entire life just to avoid a fight? I wanted to make him a warrior, but maybe I had just made him a victim. I pushed him to be perfect, and when he couldn't be, he found someone who told him exactly what to do. I had prepared him for the harshness of the streets, but I hadn't prepared him for the sweetness of a manipulator. Reggie. Booker's voice cut through the darkness. He was standing in the doorway of the kitchenette, illuminated by the harsh yellow light of the refrigerator. He was holding a tangled ball of wires in one hand and 2 mugs of instant coffee in the other. "You are thinking too loud," he said, walking over and kicking the coffee table with his foot to clear a space. "You are blaming yourself. I can see it on your face. Stop it. You didn't sign those papers. You didn't lock him in a cell. She did." He set the coffee down. It was black bitter and exactly what I needed. I sat up, my joints popping. "I taught him to be obedient, Booker," I whispered. "I taught him to follow the rules, and now he is following her rules straight to an early grave." "We can unpack your parenting mistakes later," Booker said, sitting on a milk crate he used as a chair. "Right now we need to unpack this phone. I found a charger that fits. It is an old mini USB standard for those brick phones." He plugged the charger into the wall and connected the dirty Nokia phone. We both stared at it, waiting. It was like watching a bomb defusal. 1 minute passed, then 2. Finally, the screen lit up with a battery icon. It was charging. Booker handed me the phone. "It is your son, Reggie. You drive." I took the phone. My hands were steady now. The self-pity was gone, replaced by the cold mechanical focus of the mission. I navigated the clumsy menu system. The buttons were stiff, requiring a hard press. I went to the messages. Empty. I went to the call log. Empty. She had wiped it, or Nash had been too scared to make calls. Then I went to the gallery. There were no photos. But there was one video file. It was dated 3 months ago. The file size was small, grainy, low resolution. I pressed play. The video opened on a view from a pocket or a hiding place. The camera was angled low, looking through the slats of what looked like a ventilation grate or maybe a gap in a closet door. The audio was fuzzy, filled with the hum of an air conditioner. Then figures moved into the frame. I recognized the office immediately. It was the same mahogany desk, the same leather chairs I had glimpsed through the glass doors at the sanctuary yesterday. The man sitting behind the desk was wearing a white coat. He was older, silver-haired, distinguished. Dr. Alexander Vance, the head psychiatrist, the man whose signature was on the fake dementia report Brittany had shown the sheriff. But he wasn't acting like a doctor. The door opened and Brittany walked in. She wasn't wearing a visitor badge. She was wearing a red dress, tight and revealing. She didn't sit in the patient chair. She walked right around the desk. I watched, my breath catching in my throat as Dr. Vance stood up. He didn't shake her hand. He pulled her into him. They kissed. It wasn't a quick peck. It was long, passionate, and familiar. Booker let out a low whistle. "Well, isn't that sweet?" I didn't say anything. I just watched. The kiss broke and Brittany laughed. It was a sound I had never heard before, a cruel, throaty laugh. "Is he handled?" she asked. The audio was tinny but clear enough. "He is sedated." Vance replied, smoothing his tie. I upped the dosage of the Thorazine. He won't be lucid enough to sign anything for a week. But Brittany, we need to be careful. His father came to the gate today. I froze. Wait, this video was time-stamped 3 months ago. But the dialogue. Vance was talking about me coming to the gate. No, I realized. I looked closer at the timestamp. It wasn't 3 months ago. The date format was European, day first, then month. It was dated yesterday. Nash must have recorded this yesterday just before he smuggled the phone out. He had risked everything to get this footage. Let the old man rot, Brittany said on the screen, hopping up to sit on the edge of the desk. He is harmless. I already have the sheriff eating out of my hand. As soon as Nash signs the transfer of the shell company, we can move the assets to the Cayman account. Then we can keep Nash here indefinitely. Or, she ran a finger down Vance's lapel, or we can let nature take its course. A tragic suicide in a rehab center. It happens all the time. Vance smiled. You are a wicked woman, Mrs. King. That is why I love you. The video cut to black. The silence in Booker's apartment was heavier than before. But it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a courtroom before the gavel drops. I set the phone down on the coffee table gently, as if it were made of glass. Booker looked at me. His eyes were wide. That is not just fraud, Booker whispered. That is conspiracy to commit murder. And they are sleeping together. The doctor and the wife. I stood up. The pain in my back was gone. The fatigue was gone. I walked to the window and looked out at the alleyway. A rat was skittering across the top of a dumpster hunting for scraps. I had been thinking about this all wrong. I thought I was fighting a greedy daughter-in-law who wanted to buy handbags. I thought I was fighting a system that didn't care about old black men. But I wasn't. I turned back to Booker. This changes the timeline, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. They aren't just holding him for the money. They are holding him until the transfer is done, and then they are going to kill him. Vance has the medical authority to make it look like anything he wants. A heart attack, a stroke, a suicide. Booker stood up too, cracking his knuckles. So what is the play, Reggie? We take this to the FBI. No, I said. Not yet. The FBI takes weeks to build a case. They will want subpoenas. They will want grand juries. By the time they get a warrant to enter that fortress, Nash will be dead and Brittany will be in the Caymans. I looked at the phone again. We have proof of the affair. We have proof of the conspiracy. But we need to get Nash out physically. We need to separate him from that doctor. I walked over to the pile of clothes I had been wearing. My postal uniform was long gone, retired with me. But I looked at the corner of the room where Booker kept his work gear. There was a stack of uniforms from his various security gigs, and buried at the bottom, a brown shirt. Booker, do you still have that old delivery van? The one you bought at the police auction? Yeah, Booker said slowly. It runs. Barely. But it's registered to a shell name. Why, and do you still have the magnetic decals? The ones for citywide logistics? Booker smiled. A slow, dangerous smile that showed his gold tooth. I do. I picked up the burner phone and slipped it into my pocket. Brittany thinks she has blocked every exit. She has the sheriff, she has the doctors, she has the keys to my house. But she forgot one thing. What is that? Booker asked. She forgot that every fortress has a service entrance, I said, and nobody looks twice at the delivery guy. I picked up the cold cup of coffee and downed it in one gulp. Get your tools, Booker. We are going back to the sanctuary, but this time we aren't asking for permission to enter. We are going to make a delivery they will never forget. I looked at the water stain on the ceiling one last time. It didn't look like a jagged map anymore. It looked like a crack in the foundation. And tomorrow, I was going to be the sledgehammer that turned that crack into a collapse. I wasn't just a father anymore. I wasn't just a victim. I was the postmaster. And neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night, and certainly not a cheating daughter-in-law, was going to stay this courier from the swift completion of his appointed rounds. The brown polyester shirt smelled of mothballs and stale tobacco, but to me it smelled like armor. I stood in front of the cracked mirror in Booker's bathroom, buttoning the collar all the way up to my neck. The logo on the pocket said Citywide Logistics, a company that went bankrupt 5 years ago, but nobody checks the finer details of a delivery man's uniform. They just see the color, the clipboard, and the exhaustion. I pulled the cap low over my eyes. I looked at my reflection. Reginald King, the father, was gone. In his place was just another invisible worker ant in the great American machine. Booker handed me a stack of blank invoices attached to a clipboard. He had printed them at the library an hour ago. They looked official enough if you didn't read the fine print. "Remember," Booker said, his voice low and serious. "The kitchen delivery truck arrives at 10:15 sharp. It is a Cisco refrigerated hauler. You go in right behind it. You are the overflow driver. You are carrying the specialty supplies, gluten-free bread, organic produce, whatever lies you have to tell to get past that gate." I took the clipboard. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Fear had calcified into a cold, hard resolve. I climbed into the driver's seat of Booker's beat-up delivery van. The engine coughed before roaring to life, a sound that rattled my teeth. It was a good sound, a working man's sound. I drove out of the alley and headed north, back toward the forest, back toward the fortress that held my son. The rain from last night had turned the dirt road leading to the service entrance into a slurry of mud. I watched from a lay-by as the massive Cisco truck rumbled past its air brakes hissing. I gave it a 10-second lead, then I pulled out, tucking my van into its blind spot. We were a convoy now, a parade of commerce. We reached the service gate. It was less ornate than the front entrance, but more heavily guarded. A guard with a bored expression and a rain poncho stepped out of the booth. He waved the Cisco truck through without even looking at the driver. They were regulars. Then he saw me. He held up a hand. I rolled down the window. I didn't smile. I didn't look nervous. I looked annoyed. I looked like a man who was underpaid and running late. "Who are you with?" the guard asked, squinting at the faded logo on the side of the van. "Overflow Transport?" I grunted, tapping the steering wheel impatiently. "Your kitchen manager ordered extra crate paper and cleaning solvents, said he needed them yesterday. I have been driving in circles for 20 minutes looking for this service road." The guard looked at his clipboard. "I don't have an overflow on the manifest." I let out a heavy sigh, the kind that comes from 40 years of dealing with bureaucracy. "Look, buddy," I said, channeling every ounce of my postal service frustration. "You want me to call your manager and tell him his toilet paper is sitting in the mud because you didn't have the paperwork? Or do you want to let me drop this off so I can go get my lunch? I get paid by the mile, not by the hour." The guard hesitated. He looked at the rain falling harder. He looked at the warm booth behind him. "Laziness is the best key to any lock. Go ahead," he waved me through. "Dock B, don't block the ramp." I didn't say thank you. I just rolled up the window and drove through. I was in. I parked the van next to the dumpster away from the main unloading zone. I grabbed a heavy cardboard box from the back. It was empty, but I carried it like it weighed 50 pounds. I walked onto the loading dock. It was a hive of activity. Men in white coats were shouting orders. Pallets of food were being forklifted. The noise was my cover. I walked straight for the double doors that led to the kitchen. I was 5 steps away when I froze. A security officer was standing by the door. He wasn't the problem. The problem was the German Shepherd sitting at his feet. The dog's ears perked up. It turned its head toward me. K9 units aren't trained to smell invoices. They are trained to smell fear, adrenaline, and things that don't belong. I felt a spike of panic in my chest. If that dog barked, if it alerted the game was over, I would be on the ground in seconds. The dog stood up. A low growl rumbled in its throat. The officer looked down, his hand drifting to the leash. "Easy, King," the officer said. The dog's name was King. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. I kept walking. I didn't make eye contact with the dog. I didn't slow down. I remembered what an old handler told me once. If you act like prey, you are prey. If you act like part of the environment, you are invisible. The dog took a step toward me, straining against the leash. Its nose twitched. It smelled the mothballs. It smelled the strange sweat. "Hey!" a voice shouted from the dock. I stopped. My heart hammered a hole in my chest. This was it. "You!" The guy with the box. The kitchen manager yelled, pointing at me. "You are blocking the forklift lane. Move it." I nodded an apology on my face and stepped quickly to the side, closer to the door, closer to the dog. The forklift roared past its backup alarm, beeping piercingly. The noise startled the dog. It barked at the machine, distracted. The officer yanked the leash. "Sit down, King," he commanded. I used that split second. I slipped through the double doors and into the kitchen. The smell of industrial sanitizer and roasting chicken hit me. I was inside. I didn't stop. I walked through the kitchen, dodging chefs and dishwashers. I looked like I knew exactly where I was going. I pushed through the swinging doors at the back and found myself in a service corridor. The atmosphere changed instantly. The noise of the kitchen vanished. The floors here were carpeted. The walls were painted a soothing, expensive beige. There were no windows. This was the residential wing. I checked the mental map I had memorized from the fire escape plan I had glimpsed on the receptionist's desk yesterday. The north wing. That was where the high-security patients were. I walked down the hallway. I heard the rhythmic hum of a motorized camera. I glanced up. A black dome was mounted on the ceiling. I slowed my pace. I watched the red light. Blink, blink, sweep left, blink, blink, sweep right. I timed it. I had a 3-second window when the camera swept back to the center. I waited for the sweep, then moved. Fast, silent steps. I ducked into a linen alcove just as the camera swung back. I was an old man, but adrenaline is a powerful drug. My senses were dialed up to 11. I could hear the murmur of a television from a room down the hall. I could hear the rubber squeak of nurse shoes around the corner. I waited for the nurse to pass. She was carrying a tray of pills. She looked tired. She didn't look into the alcove. I stepped back out. I was getting closer. The room numbers were counting up. 208. 210. I needed the elevator to the 3rd floor. I found the service elevator. It required a key card. I cursed under my breath. I didn't have a key card. But then the universe threw me a bone. A janitor pushed a cart full of laundry out of the elevator. The doors started to close behind him. I didn't think. I lunged. I stuck my boot between the closing doors. The sensor triggered and the doors bounced back open. I slipped inside and hit the button for the 3rd floor. The ride up took an eternity. The elevator smelled of bleach and despair. When the doors opened, the air was colder. This was the high-security floor. There were no paintings on the walls here. The doors were heavy steel with small reinforced glass windows. I walked down the corridor. My box felt light now. My hands were sweating against the cardboard. Room 301, empty. Room 302, an old woman screaming silently behind the glass. Room 303, a man pacing in circles talking to himself. And then I saw it. Room 304. I stopped. The hallway was empty. The silence was heavy, pressurized. I stepped up to the door. I put the box down on the floor. I looked through the small rectangular window. The room was dim. There was a bed bolted to the floor, and on the bed, curled into a fetal position, was a figure. He was thin, so thin. His cheekbones jutted out. His skin was gray. He was wearing a hospital gown that hung off his frame. Nash. My son. He wasn't moving. For a terrifying second, I thought he was dead. Then I saw the slow, shallow rise and fall of his chest. He was alive, but he wasn't really there. I reached for the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. It was a prison cell disguised as a medical suite. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. I wanted to scream his name. I wanted to smash the window, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had to be smart. I had to get inside without triggering the alarm. I looked at the lock mechanism. It was a magnetic key card system, but it also had a manual override keyhole for emergencies. I reached into my pocket. I didn't have a key, but I had Booker's lock-picking kit. I knelt down. I looked at the camera down the hall. It was sweeping away from me. I had 10 seconds. I inserted the tension wrench. I inserted the rake. My hands, the hands that had sorted 1,000,000 letters, the hands that had fixed bicycles and built porches, went to work. I felt the pins inside the lock. 1 click, 2 clicks. I wasn't a criminal. I was a father. And there is no lock in the world strong enough to keep a father from his son. The lock turned. I stood up, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The smell of sickness and sedatives washed over me. I stepped into the darkness of room 304 and the door clicked shut behind me. I was in. Now came the hard part, waking him up. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing us inside the air-conditioned nightmare of room 304. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of a cardiac monitor and the hum of a ventilation system that smelled of recycled air and harsh antiseptic. I took a step forward, my boots making no sound on the sterilized linoleum. My eyes took a second to adjust to the gloom. The only light came from the glowing green numbers on the medical equipment and a sliver of gray daylight fighting its way through the heavy security blinds. I walked to the bed. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird since I entered the facility, suddenly stopped. It just froze. Lying there was a stranger. The man in the bed was skeletal. His cheekbones jutted out like jagged rocks under skin that was the color of wet ash. His hair, usually kept in a precise, expensive fade, was long and matted against the pillow. But it was his arms that made the bile rise in my throat. They were strapped to the metal rails of the bed with thick leather cuffs, not medical restraints. These were heavy, reinforced restraints meant for violent criminals. Nash. I whispered his name, but the word got stuck in my throat. I reached out and touched his hand. It was ice cold. His fingernails were blue. This wasn't a rehabilitation center. This was a storage unit for a human being. I looked at the IV drip hanging above his head. I squinted at the label on the bag. I didn't need a medical degree to know what I was looking at. A cocktail of sedatives strong enough to take down a horse. They were keeping him in a chemical coma. I grabbed his shoulder and shook him. Gently at first, then harder. Nash. Son. Wake up. It is Dad. His head rolled to the side, his eyelids fluttering. A low groan escaped his cracked lips. It was a sound of pure misery. Nash, listen to me. I need you to open your eyes. The delivery man is here. I slapped his cheek. Lightly. Then again. Come on, soldier. Wake up. Slowly, agonizingly, his eyes opened. The whites were yellowed and bloodshot. The pupils were pinpricks dilated by the drugs. He looked at me, but he didn't see me. He looked through me. No, he mumbled, his voice a dry rasp. No more. I signed it. I already signed it. Nash, look at me. It is Reggie. It is your father. He blinked. He tried to pull his hand away, but the leather cuff caught him. The sound of the leather straining against the metal rail seemed to snap something in his brain. A flicker of recognition sparked in his dull eyes. Dad. He whispered the word like it was a prayer he didn't believe would be answered. Dad, you can't be here. She will see you. She has cameras. I am here, son, I said, reaching into my pocket for my knife to cut the straps. But the leather was too thick. I cursed under my breath. Why are you tied up, Nash? Why did you tell me you were in Dubai? Tears began to leak from the corners of his eyes, cutting tracks through the grime on his face. He started to shake a tremor that started in his hands and took over his whole body. She said the IRS was coming for you, Dad. I stopped trying to undo the buckle. I froze. What did you say? Nash swallowed hard, trying to moisten his throat. Brittany. She came to me 2 years ago. She had letters. From the government, she said you hadn't paid taxes on the house in 10 years. She said they were going to arrest you. She said you would die in prison because of your age. I stared at him. The lie was so audacious, so easily disprovable, yet so perfectly targeted. Brittany knew Nash's weakness wasn't money, it was me. She knew he would do anything to protect the man who raised him. I have never missed a tax payment in my life, Nash, I said, my voice trembling with rage. I have the receipts in my filing cabinet. I know that now, Nash sobbed, his voice cracking. But she showed me the warrants. They looked real, Dad. They had the seals. She said she could fix it. She said she knew a judge. But she needed money. She needed control of the assets to pay the fines without alerting the auditors. He took a ragged breath, fighting against the fog of the drugs. She told me if I signed the power of attorney, she could shield you. She said I had to disappear for a while so they couldn't question me. She brought me here. She said it was for stress, a vacation. But the first night they gave me a shot, and when I woke up, I was tied down. I listened to his confession, and the pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with the force of a wrecking ball. Nash wasn't weak. He wasn't a coward who let his wife run his life. He was a son who had walked into a trap to save his father. He had endured 2 years of hell, 2 years of chemical torture, believing that his suffering was the price of my freedom. She gaslighted you, son, I whispered, brushing the hair from his forehead. She used your love for me as a weapon. Nash looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. Dad, you have to go. Dr. Vance, he is with her. They come in at night. They make me sign things. Checks, transfers. Last week they made me sign a new will. A new will, the final piece. They weren't just stealing his money. They were preparing for his end. Once the will was processed, once the waiting period was over, Nash, King would die of a tragic heart attack in his sleep, and Brittany would be the grieving widow with a fortune. I am not going anywhere without you, I said, grabbing the bed rail. No. Nash tried to sit up, straining against the cuffs. You can't get me out. I can't walk. My legs. I haven't walked in months. If they find you here, they will kill us both. You need proof, Dad. Get the proof. He was right. I looked at his atrophied legs. He was dead weight. I couldn't carry him and fight off security. If I tried to drag him out now, we would both be tackled in the hallway. I needed to bring the cavalry. But first, I needed the ammunition. I pulled out the burner phone. I am going to take pictures, Nash. I am going to show the world what they did to you. I started snapping photos. I photographed the leather restraints biting into his wrists. I photographed the IV bag with the label calling for a lethal dose of sedatives. I turned to the bedside table. There was a clipboard, the medical chart. I flipped it open. My hands were shaking, but the camera lens was steady. Patient Nash King. Guardian Brittany King. Diagnosis paranoid schizophrenia. Terminal progression. Treatment plan, palliative sedation. Palliative sedation. That is medical speak for waiting for someone to die. I photographed every page. The fake diagnosis signed by Dr. Vance. The visitation log that showed Brittany visiting once a month, always accompanied by Vance. Dad, hurry, Nash whispered. The monitor. I looked at the cardiac monitor. Nash's heart rate was spiking. The stress of waking up, the fear, the conversation, it was pushing his heart rate to 120. Beep, beep, beep. The rhythm was getting faster, louder. They monitor it at the nurse's station. Nash gasped. If it goes too high, they send the team. I took one last photo of Nash's face, the face of a man who had been buried alive. I promise you, I said, gripping his shoulder, I am coming back. I am bringing the feds. I am bringing the Marines. I am bringing God himself if I have to. You just hold on. Do not sign anything else. Do you hear me? I hear you. Dad, he whispered, I love you. I love you too, son. I turned to the door. I had the evidence. I had the truth. Suddenly, a red light above the door started flashing. A silent alarm. Code Blue Room 304, a mechanical voice announced over the intercom. Code Blue Room 304. They were coming. I looked at Nash one last time. He nodded at me. A nod of courage. He was ready to stay behind so I could win the war. I grabbed my empty delivery box. I couldn't go back out the way I came. The elevator would be swarming with security. I looked at the window. It was reinforced glass looking out over the delivery bay. 3rd floor. No fire escape. I looked at the ventilation grate in the ceiling. It was too small. Then I saw the laundry chute. It was a small metal door in the wall next to the bathroom. Dirty linen. I ran to it and pulled it open. It was dark, smelling of bleach and sickness. It went straight down to the basement laundry room. I looked back at the door to the hallway. I could hear heavy boots running on the linoleum. I could hear keys jingling. I climbed onto the ledge of the chute. I was 71 years old. I had bad knees and a bad back. But right now I was a missile aimed at the heart of Brittany's empire. I threw the burner phone deep into my pocket, zipped the jacket tight, and crossed my arms over my chest. Hold on, Nash, I whispered, and I let go. The darkness swallowed me whole just as the door to room 304 burst open. I was falling, sliding down the metal tunnel, picking up speed, hurtling toward the basement and the freedom I needed to burn their world to the ground. The darkness of the laundry chute was absolute. It was a metal throat swallowing me whole, smelling of bleach and the sour chemical reek of industrial detergent. I was sliding feet first, picking up speed, the rivets of the galvanized steel tearing at my delivery uniform. I am 71 years old. My bones are brittle. My joints are rusted. But as I plummeted down that black tunnel, I didn't feel the pain. I only felt the crushing weight of what I had left behind. I had left him. I had looked into my son's terrified, drugged eyes, promised him I would save him, and then I had turned my back and jumped into a hole in the wall. The image of Nash strapped to that bed like an animal burned behind my eyelids in the dark. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to climb back up to fight them with my bare hands, to die beside him if I had to. But I knew the math. I spent 40 years calculating logistics. If I stayed, we both lost. If I escaped, we had a chance. The slide ended abruptly. I shot out of the chute and slammed into a mountain of dirty linens. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I tumbled down the pile of sheets, gasping for air, my ribs screaming in protest. I landed on the concrete floor of the basement laundry room with a wet thud. I lay there for a second, staring up at the fluorescent lights, waiting for my vision to clear. The room was massive, filled with the roar of industrial washing machines that thumped like the heartbeat of a giant. Steam hissed from overhead pipes. Then I heard the voice. It wasn't a machine. It was coming from the chute I had just exited. He went down the laundry line. Seal the basement. Get the dogs down there. The echo was metallic and distorted, but the threat was clear. They were coming. I scrambled to my feet. My left knee buckled a sharp bolt of agony shooting up my leg, but I forced it to hold my weight. I couldn't limp. Limping was for victims. I had to move. I scanned the room. There were 3 doors. One led to the service elevator's suicide. One led to the main stairwell trap. The third was a heavy steel fire door at the far end, marked with a red exit sign. I ran. Or at least I moved as fast as a battered old man can move. I wove between the carts of laundry, using them as cover. The door to the stairwell burst open behind me. I didn't look back. I heard heavy boots hitting the concrete. There! Stop him! I threw my shoulder against the crash bar of the fire door. It groaned but didn't open. Locked from the outside. Of course. It was a prison, not a hotel. I looked around, frantic. The guards were closing in. I could hear the click of tasers being armed. Then I saw it. The loading bay for the chemical waste. A roll-up garage door about 4 feet high, used for sliding out drums of hazardous cleaning fluid. It was cracked open a few inches for ventilation. I dropped to the floor and rolled toward it. I grabbed the bottom of the rusted metal door and heaved upward. It was heavy, fighting me with years of grime and rust. Halt. Put your hands on your head. The shout was right behind me. I didn't halt. I groaned, putting every ounce of old man strength I had left into my back, and yanked the door up just enough to squeeze through. I shimmied under the metal lip, the rough concrete scraping my stomach. A hand grabbed my ankle, a leather glove, strong. I kicked out blindly, violently. My boot connected with something solid, a face mask, maybe a nose. The grip loosened. I pulled myself through into the rain and let the heavy door slam shut behind me. I was outside. The rain was torrential now, a curtain of gray water that washed the sweat from my face instantly. I was in a narrow alley behind the main building, lined with dumpsters. The alarm was blaring loud enough to wake the dead, a piercing siren that cut through the storm. I scrambled up the muddy embankment, slipping and sliding. I needed to get to the service road. I needed to get to the rendezvous point. I crested the hill and saw the perimeter fence. It was 12 feet high, topped with razor wire. And between me and that fence was a wide expanse of manicured lawn, now turning into a mud bath. I started to run across the open ground. Lights swept across the grass. Floodlights from the guard towers. They pinned me in their glare. I froze for a split second, a deer in the headlights, my brown uniform stark against the green grass. Subject acquired in the north sector. Release the K9s. I heard the barking before I saw them. Deep, guttural barks. German shepherds, faster than me, stronger than me. I pushed my legs harder. My lungs were burning. I wasn't running toward the gate anymore. I was running toward the tree line, hoping to climb, hoping to hide. But I knew I wouldn't make it. The distance was too great. I reached the service road, my boots heavy with mud. The barking was getting closer. I could hear the wet slap of paws on the pavement. I turned. 2 dogs were sprinting toward me, teeth-bared eyes locked on my throat. Behind them, 3 guards were running, weapons drawn. I reached into my pocket. I grabbed the burner phone. If they took me down, I would throw it into the woods. I would destroy it. They couldn't have the photos. I braced myself for the impact of the dogs. I closed my eyes. I had failed. I had gotten the proof, and I was going to lose it 5 yards from freedom. Then the world exploded. There was a roar that drowned out the thunder. A screech of metal tearing metal. I opened my eyes just as a battered white delivery van smashed through the chain-link service gate, sending sparks and twisted fencing flying into the air. The van didn't slow down. It fishtailed in the mud, the engine screaming, and drifted sideways, placing its steel body between me and the charging dogs. The side door slid open. Get in. Now. It was Booker. He was in the driver's seat, wrestling with the steering wheel, his eyes wild. I didn't hesitate. I dove into the back of the van, landing on a pile of empty cardboard boxes. "Go!" I screamed. Booker slammed the accelerator. The van lurched forward, tires spinning in the mud before finding traction. We shot back out through the hole in the fence, bouncing violently over the wreckage. I heard a thud against the side of the van, one of the dogs hitting the panel. Then came the pop, pop, pop of gunfire. They were shooting at us. "Keep your head down," Booker yelled. I curled into a ball, clutching the burner phone to my chest. The van swerved onto the asphalt of the main road, the back doors rattling. Booker took the corner on two wheels, driving like a man possessed. We drove in silence for 5 miles, the siren fading behind us, replaced by the sound of the rain drumming on the roof. Finally, Booker slowed down to a legal speed. He looked in the rearview mirror, his face pale. "Did you get it?" he asked, his voice shaking. I sat up, wiping the mud from my face. I pulled out the phone. I opened the gallery. The picture of Nash tied to the bed stared back at me. "I got it," I whispered. "I got everything." Booker let out a long breath. "Good, because we can never go back there." I looked out the back window at the receding forest. I had escaped. I was safe, but the victory tasted like ash. I had left my son in that room. I had left him alone in the dark, knowing that his father had come and gone. "I am sorry, Nash," I said to the empty air. "I am so sorry." 50 miles away, inside the warm, dry office of a luxury real estate firm, a phone rang. Brittany picked it up on the first ring. She was examining a color swatch for the new curtains she planned to hang in the lake house, the one she had bought with the money from the joint account. "Mrs. King." "It is Dr. Vance." Brittany frowned. Vance never called her work line. It was reckless. "I told you not to call me here, Alexander," she hissed. "We have a problem," Vance said. His voice was high-panicked. "There was a breach. Someone broke into the north wing." What? Brittany stood up, the fabric swatch fluttering to the floor. "Who?" It was an old man, dressed as a delivery driver. He got into room 304. Brittany felt the blood drain from her face. Reggie. It had to be Reggie. The old fool hadn't gone to the motel. He had pulled a Trojan horse. "Did you catch him?" she asked, her knuckles white on the phone. "No. He escaped. He had an accomplice. They drove a van through the perimeter fence. But Brittany, the nurses say he had a camera. He took pictures of the patient. He took pictures of the charts." Brittany closed her eyes. She saw her future flashing before her eyes, not the yachts and the parties, but an orange jumpsuit and steel bars. If Reggie had photos of Nash in restraints, the dementia story wouldn't hold up for 5 minutes. The power of attorney would be voided. The federal investigation would begin. She needed to cut the thread. Now. "Is Nash still secure?" she asked, her voice turning into a sheet of ice. "Yes," Vance said. "He is agitated. His heart rate is up. He is talking about his father coming back with the Marines." "Good," Brittany said. "Listen to me very carefully, Alexander. We are out of time. The old man will go to the feds. We have maybe 12 hours before they get a warrant." "So we move him," Vance suggested. "No," Brittany said. "Moving him is too risky. If they catch us with him in a transport, it's kidnapping. We need the problem to go away. Permanently." There was a silence on the other end of the line, a heavy, terrifying silence. Brittany walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. "He is depressed, isn't he, doctor?" she said softly. "He has a history of mental instability. That is what the charts say." "Yes," Vance stammered. "And patients with severe depression often succumb to their demons. An overdose, a tragic mistake with his medication." "Brittany," Vance warned. "Do it," she snapped. "Increase the dosage. Make it look like he hoarded his pills and took them all at once. Call me when he flatlines. Then call the coroner. By the time Reggie gets back with his warrant, he will be looking for a corpse, not a witness. And dead men don't testify." She hung up the phone. Her hand was shaking just a little. She smoothed her skirt. She picked up the curtain swatch. Midnight blue. Yes, she thought. That will look lovely in the master bedroom, assuming she lived long enough to enjoy it. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, aching stiffness in my joints that reminded me I was 71 years old and had just jumped down a laundry chute. I sat in the passenger seat of Booker's van, clutching the burner phone like it was a holy relic. My hands were shaking not from fear anymore, but from the sheer magnitude of what I was holding. I had the proof. I had the photos of Nash tied to a bed, wasted away, drugged into oblivion. I had the medical chart signed by a doctor who was sleeping with my daughter-in-law. In my mind, the war was over. I just needed to hand this weapon to the authorities, and the walls of Jericho would come tumbling down. Booker drove us straight to the sheriff's station. It was a brick building on the edge of town, the same place where I used to bring donuts on Christmas morning when I was postmaster. I knew these men. I trusted the badge. I thought that despite Sheriff Miller's friendship with Brittany, he was still a lawman. You cannot look at a picture of a man shackled to a bed and call it anything other than torture. "Wait here," I told Booker as he pulled up to the curb. "Keep the engine running. If they try to hold me, you call the state troopers." I walked into the station. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The night shift deputy looked up, surprised to see a mud-caked old man in a torn delivery uniform limping into the lobby. I didn't wait for him to ask questions. I marched straight to the sheriff's office door and knocked. Miller was there. He was sitting at his desk, eating a sandwich, looking bored. When he saw me, he didn't look concerned. He looked annoyed. He looked like a man who was hoping to finish his shift without any drama, and I was the drama he had been trying to avoid. Reggie Miller sighed, wiping crumbs from his mouth. "I thought we agreed you were going to the motel. What happened to you? You look like you rolled down a hill." I didn't answer. I walked up to his desk and slammed the burner phone down on top of his paperwork. "Look," I said. "Just look." Miller frowned. He picked up the phone. I navigated to the gallery for him. I watched his face as he swiped through the photos. I expected shock. I expected him to reach for his radio. I expected him to jump up and demand answers. Instead, he just squinted. He swiped again. Then he set the phone down gently, leaned back in his chair, and crossed his arms. So he said, his voice flat, "You broke in." I stared at him. I felt the floor tilting under my feet. "Did you see the pictures, Jim?" I asked, my voice rising. "That is my son. He is tied to a bed with leather straps. He is emaciated. They are drugging him. That is kidnapping. That is abuse." Miller shook his head slowly. He opened a drawer and pulled out a file. He tossed it onto the desk. "It is not kidnapping, Reggie. It is treatment." He tapped the file with a thick finger. "Brittany called me 20 minutes ago. She told me there was a security breach. She told me an intruder had agitated a high-risk patient. She sent over the updated medical directives." He opened the file. It was full of papers I recognized, the same papers I had seen in Nash's room. "Dr. Vance has authorized the use of physical restraints for patient safety." Miller recited, reading from the page like he was ordering lunch. "Patient has a history of self-harm. Patient is a flight risk. Patient is currently undergoing aggressive therapy for severe paranoid schizophrenia." He looked up at me. His eyes were cold. "Those straps aren't torture devices, Reggie. They are prescribed medical equipment. And those drugs, they are FDA-approved antipsychotics. Everything in those pictures is legal." "Legal!" I screamed, slamming my hand on the desk. "Look at his face. He is dying. He told me she forced him to sign the power of attorney. She threatened him." "Can you prove that?" Miller asked. "Do you have a recording of the threat? Do you have a witness? Because all I see is a notarized document signed by your son giving his wife full control over his medical and financial decisions. And I have a board-certified psychiatrist stating that your son is mentally incompetent." I felt like I was drowning. The water was rising, and the sheriff was just watching me sink. "Jim," I pleaded, lowering my voice, "you know Nash. You watched him grow up. You know he isn't crazy. You know Brittany is spending his money. I went to the bank. The account is empty. And she has the legal right to spend it," Miller said, cutting me off. "That is what power of attorney means, Reggie. It means she is him legally speaking. If she wants to drain the account to pay for his care, she can. If she wants to sell the house, she can." He stood up. He walked around the desk and stood in front of me. He was a big man, and he used his size to intimidate. "You, on the other hand," he said, leaning down, "you committed a felony tonight. You trespassed on a private medical facility. You assaulted a security guard. You destroyed private property. Brittany is on the phone with her lawyers right now. She wants to press charges." He picked up the burner phone. "This," he said, weighing the phone in his hand, "this is evidence of a crime. Your crime. I should arrest you right now. I should throw you in a cell and throw away the key. Then why don't you? I challenged him, staring him right in the eye. Arrest me. Put me on the stand. Let me show these pictures to a jury. Miller laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. A jury, Reggie, by the time this goes to trial, Dr. Vance will testify that you are a senile old man who broke in and traumatized his patient. Brittany will testify that she is a loving wife doing her best. And Nash will be in a long-term care facility in Switzerland or wherever they decide to send him next. You won't win. You will just die in prison. He shoved the phone back into my chest. I am doing you a favor, Reggie, because I liked you. Because you were a good postmaster. Get out of here. Get out of my town. Go stay with your sister in Chicago. If I see you near that facility again, or if you come back to this station with more crazy stories, I won't be asking you to leave. I will be reading you your rights. He turned his back on me. He sat down and picked up his sandwich. Close the door on your way out. I stood there for a moment, paralyzing shock turning into a cold, hard clarity. I looked at the back of Miller's head. He wasn't just lazy, he was bought. Brittany had covered every base. She had the medical system. She had the legal system. She had the law enforcement. She had built a cage for Nash that was made of paperwork and bureaucracy, and it was stronger than any steel bars. I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. The rain outside felt colder now. It soaked through my thin uniform, chilling me to the bone. I walked to the van. Booker looked at me. He saw my face. He didn't ask what happened. He just unlocked the door. I climbed in. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just watched the windshield wipers slap back and forth. Slap, slap, like a metronome counting down the minutes of my son's life. They didn't take it, Booker asked softly. They took it, I said, my voice sounding like gravel, and they twisted it. The sheriff says it is all legal. He says the restraints are for his safety. He says if I push it, I go to jail for trespassing. Booker hit the steering wheel. I told you, Reggie, I told you the system is rigged. You can't beat them with their own rules. I looked at the burner phone in my lap. Miller was right about one thing. Local law was a dead end. Civil law was a trap. If I tried to fight the power of attorney in court, Nash would be dead before the first hearing. I needed a different kind of law, a law that Sheriff Miller couldn't touch, a law that Dr. Vance couldn't bribe. I thought about the receipt I had found in Nash's office, the one for the care package. I thought about the fake letters Brittany had sent to the investors. I thought about the bank statements she had mailed to herself. She had used the mail. She had used the United States Postal Service to facilitate her fraud. She had used the mail to send the fake medical reports. She had used the mail to move the stolen assets. A small spark lit up in the darkness of my mind. It grew into a flame. Booker, I said, start driving. Where are we going, Chicago? No, I said. We are going to the federal building downtown. Reggie, it is midnight. The FBI is closed. I am not looking for the FBI, I said. I looked at Booker. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had just found a gap in the fence. Brittany made one mistake, Booker. She thought the sheriff was the highest authority in this town. But she forgot who I used to be. She forgot that there is one agency that doesn't care about local politics. One agency that has a 98% conviction rate. One agency that you do not mess with. I pulled my old expired badge out of my pocket. I rubbed my thumb over the eagle. We are going to find the postal inspector, I said. She committed mail fraud, and that my friend is a federal offense. Booker looked at me confused. The mail police? You think they can stop a murder? I looked out the window as the streetlights blurred past. You have no idea, Booker. When the Postal Inspection Service comes knocking, they don't bring a warrant. They bring a sledgehammer. Miller won't help us. But the feds are going to eat her alive. Drive, Booker. We have a delivery to make. The windshield wipers of Booker's van slapped back and forth, a rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds of my son's life. Slap, slap, slap. Outside, the city was sleeping, oblivious to the fact that a man was being tortured in a luxury facility just 50 miles away. I sat in the passenger seat, staring at the blurred streetlights, feeling the cold weight of the burner phone in my pocket. Sheriff Miller's words echoed in my head like a judge's gavel. Legal. Everything she did was legal. The restraints were medical. The isolation was therapeutic. The theft was authorized. I had played by the rules my entire life. I paid my taxes. I obeyed the speed limit. I respected the badge. And where had it gotten me? homeless, broke, and dismissed as a senile old man while a predator drank champagne in my house. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as it was designed to protect those with the money to buy the keys. Booker drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He knew better than to ask what the plan was, mostly because he knew I didn't have one. We were drifting two old ghosts haunting a city that had moved on without us. But as I watched the rain streak down the glass, my mind drifted back to the receipt I had found in Nash's office, the one tucked under the printer. It wasn't just a receipt for a package. It was a receipt for a Priority Mail Express envelope. I closed my eyes and visualized the document. I had spent 40 years looking at those forms. I knew every box, every code, every regulation. The sender was Brittany King. The recipient was a private equity firm in Chicago, Nash's business partners. The content description was listed as quarterly financial reports. Then I thought about the other documents, the fake medical evaluation from Dr. Vance. Brittany had mailed a copy to the insurance company to trigger the long-term disability payments. I had seen the envelope on her hall table last week, stamped and ready to go. A sudden electric jolt shot through my spine. It started at the base of my neck and spread to my fingertips, chasing away the cold and the fatigue. "Stop the van," I said. Booker slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding on the wet asphalt. We came to a halt in the middle of an empty intersection. "What is it?" Booker asked, reaching under his seat for a tire iron. "Are we being followed?" "No," I whispered. I started to laugh. It was a dry, raspy sound, but it was laughter. I was laughing at the sheer, beautiful arrogance of criminals who think they are smarter than the system. Booker looked at me like I had finally cracked. "Reggie, you are scaring me. What is funny?" "She used the mail." "Booker!" I turned to him, my eyes wide. "She used the United States Postal Service." Booker stared at me blankly. "So what? People use the mail every day." "Not like this," I said. My voice was gaining strength, the postmaster voice returning. "Listen to me. If you walk into a bank and lie to the manager to get a loan that is bank fraud, it is a local crime. The sheriff handles it. If you lie to a doctor to get someone committed, that is medical fraud, state level. But the second you put that lie in an envelope, stick a stamp on it, and drop it in a federal mailbox, that is different." I pulled out my old badge again. It caught the light from the street lamp. Title 18, United States Code Section 1341. I recited from memory. Mail fraud. Whoever having devised or intending to devise any scheme or artifice to defraud places in any post office or authorized depository for mail matter, any matter or thing whatever, to be sent or delivered by the Postal Service, shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 20 years. Booker blinked. 20 years? For mailing a letter, for using a federal agency to commit a crime, I corrected him. It is the hammer of God, Booker. It is how they got the mob in the 30s. It is how they take down Ponzi schemes. The sheriff doesn't care if Brittany steals Nash's money because he says it is a civil dispute. But the federal government, they care deeply if you use their trucks to move fraudulent documents across state lines. I looked at the burner phone. I didn't need to convince Sheriff Miller. I didn't need to convince a family court judge. I just needed to talk to my people. "Drive to the federal building," I ordered. "But it is closed," Booker argued. "It is 2 a.m. "The lobby is closed," I said. "The inspection service never sleeps." We drove downtown. The federal building loomed like a concrete monolith against the rainy sky. It was ugly, imposing, and exactly what I needed. Booker parked across the street. "You stay here," I said. "If I am not back in an hour, well, you know the drill." I walked up to the side entrance. There was a camera and an intercom. I didn't press the button for the security guard. I pressed the button marked USPIS, Emergency Dispatch. A voice crackled on the line. "Dispatch, state your business." "This is retired Postmaster Reginald King, Shield number 4922, Detroit District. I am reporting a frantic active Section 13401 violation involving a violent kidnapping and high-level identity theft. I have physical evidence of federal mail tampering, and I am requesting an immediate audience with the duty inspector." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. In the world of federal law enforcement, the Postal Inspection Service is often the forgotten sibling of the FBI. People think they just look for lost packages. But the truth is, they are the oldest federal law enforcement agency in the country. They are armed, they are dangerous, and they take their jurisdiction very seriously. When a former postmaster calls in a code, they listen. Hold please, Shield 4922. I waited in the rain. 30 seconds later, the heavy steel door clicked and buzzed. I pulled it open and stepped inside. I was met by two officers in tactical gear. They weren't smiling, but they weren't pointing guns at me either. They checked my ID. They patted me down. They took the burner phone and put it in a Faraday bag. Follow us. They led me down a hallway that smelled of floor polish and serious business. We entered a conference room with no windows. Sitting at the table was a woman I recognized, though she looked older now. Inspector Sarah Jenkins. I had trained her when she was a rookie investigator 10 years ago. She was tough as nails then. She looked like steel now. "Reggie," she asked, standing up. Her eyes scanned my dirty uniform, my mud-caked boots. "What on earth happened to you?" "I need you to listen to me, Sarah," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "And I need you to forget that I am Reggie the old man. I need you to listen to me as an officer of the court." "Sit down," she said. I sat. I told her everything. I didn't start with the emotional story of the father and son. I started with the crimes. Subject Brittany King has utilized the USPS to transmit falsified financial statements to investors in Chicago, I said, my voice steady. She has utilized the mail to send fraudulent medical directives to insurance carriers in Hartford. She has intercepted federal correspondence addressed to Nash King, destroyed it, and forged his signature on return receipts. Sarah was taking notes, her pen flying across the pad. "And the victim?" she asked. "The victim is being held at a private facility called The Sanctuary," I said. I showed her the photos on the burner phone. "Look at the date stamps on the documents in the background. Look at the postmarks on the envelopes on the table." Sarah looked at the photos of Nash. Her expression tightened. She zoomed in on the medical chart I had photographed. "This signature," she pointed to Dr. Vance's scrawl. "It is dated the same day a priority mail package was received." "Correct," I said. She mailed him the kickback check. I saw the receipt stub in her trash, but I couldn't retrieve it. However, if you pull the tracking data for her account, Sarah picked up a landline phone. She dialed a 4-digit extension. "Get me the forensic data team," she said. "I need a subpoena for all mail traffic and courier data related to a Brittany King and a Dr. Alexander Vance. Priority 1. And get me the liaison for the FBI. We have a kidnapping crossing state lines facilitated by mail fraud." She hung up and looked at me. "Reggie," she said softly, "if we do this, there is no going back. If we raid that facility and you are wrong, if those documents are genuine, you will go to prison for filing a false federal report. You will lose your pension. You will lose everything." I looked at the photo of Nash one last time. I looked at his hollow eyes. I looked at the straps. "I already lost everything, Sarah," I said. "All I have left is the truth." Sarah nodded. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard. She picked up a red marker. "Okay," she said. "We aren't going to knock on the door. We are going to execute a federal search warrant. We need to prove the mail fraud first to get the judge to sign off on the raid." She looked at the clock. It was 3:20 a.m. "Where are the documents she mailed?" Sarah asked. "The ones that prove the fraud." "They are in Chicago," I said. "At the partner's office. And at the insurance company in Hartford." "We can't get those in time," Sarah muttered. "We need something local, something she mailed recently, something we can intercept before it gets delivered." I thought about the conversation I had overheard. Brittany saying she needed to transfer the assets, the new will. "She made him sign a new will," I said, "last week. She said she was going to file it." Sarah's eyes widened. "If she mailed that will to the courthouse or her lawyer, it is still in the system." She grabbed her radio. "All units, this is Inspector Jenkins. Halt all outgoing mail trucks from the North District Distribution Center. We are looking for a specific envelope. Priority mail. Sender Brittany King." She looked at me. "Reggie, you know the North District sorting facility better than anyone. Can you help us find a needle in a haystack?" I stood up. My knees didn't hurt anymore. "Sarah," I said, "I don't just know the facility. I designed the sorting algorithm. Get me a vest." "Yeah." "We are going hunting." For the first time in 24 hours, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the hunter. Brittany had used my own weapon against me. She had used the mail. But she forgot one thing. The mail doesn't belong to her. It belongs to us. And tonight the mail was going to testify against her. The dumpster behind Brittany's luxury real estate office smelled of shredded paper, expensive espresso grounds, and the metallic tang of rain on rusty steel. It was 3:30 in the morning. The city was asleep, but Booker and I were knee-deep in the refuse of my daughter-in-law's empire. Inspector Jenkins had given us a vest and a silent nod, but she couldn't give us a warrant without probable cause. We had to find the link. We had to find the physical proof that Brittany had used the United States Postal Service to facilitate her crimes. I shined my flashlight into a black plastic bag. Rainwater dripped from the brim of my cap, mixing with the sweat on my face. I wasn't just digging through trash. I was conducting a forensic audit. People think that when they throw something away, it disappears. But a postmaster knows that nothing truly disappears. Every piece of paper tells a story. Every discarded envelope has a tracking number. And criminals, especially arrogant ones like Brittany, always make mistakes. They get lazy. They think the shredder is a magic box. "Reggie over here," Booker whispered. He was standing on a crate leaning over the far side of the dumpster. "I think I found the recycling bin from the executive suite." I waded through the garbage bags, my boots slipping on wet cardboard. Booker handed me a clear blue bag. It was heavy with paper. We climbed out of the dumpster and dragged the bag into the shadow of the delivery van. I sliced it open with my pocket knife. It spilled out like a waterfall of white confetti. But not everything was shredded. There were crumpled balls of paper, rejection piles, drafts that hadn't printed correctly. I started smoothing them out. My hands were shaking, trembling with the cold and the adrenaline. Invoice for office chairs, useless. Flyer for an open house, useless. Menu for a catering company, useless. Then my flashlight beam hit a piece of thermal paper. It was wadded up tight, stained with coffee. I unfolded it carefully, peeling the wet edges apart. It was a shipping label, a click-and-ship label generated online, but the printer had jammed. The barcode was smeared, making it scanned as void. I looked at the address. To Midwest Life Insurance Claims, Deeped, Hartford, CT, from B. King, Power of Attorney for N. King. Date October 14th, tracking number 9405-5036-9930. I stopped breathing. October 14th. That was the day after Dr. Vance signed the fake dementia diagnosis. Brittany had tried to print the label to mail the claim. The printer jammed. She threw this copy away and printed a new one. But here was the kicker. On the back of the thermal paper stuck to the adhesive was a handwritten note. It was Brittany's handwriting. Distinctive, loopy, arrogant. Note to self. Send original to Hartford via overnight. Send copy to Vance for his files. Do not use corporate account. Pay cash at the kiosk. I looked at Booker. "This is it," I whispered. "This proves intent." She knew she had to hide the transaction. She explicitly wrote down that she was using the mail to send the fraudulent claim. This piece of trash connects the doctor, the insurance fraud, and the postal service in one single chain. I pulled a plastic evidence bag from my pocket, a gift from Inspector Jenkins, and slid the wet receipt inside. "We got her," Booker said, grinning. His gold tooth glinted in the darkness. "We actually got her." Suddenly, the alley was flooded with blinding white light. I threw my arm up to shield my eyes. A heavy SUV had pulled into the mouth of the alley, blocking our exit. High beams seared through the rain. Doors opened. I didn't see uniforms. I didn't see badges. I saw 3 men in dark raincoats. They were big. They moved with the heavy, confident stride of men who hurt people for a living. "Hey," one of them shouted. His voice was deep, booming off the brick walls. "Put the bag down." I froze. Brittany. She must have seen the van on the security cameras. She didn't call the police this time. She called her cleaners. Booker stepped in front of me. "Get in the van, Reggie," he said, low and dangerous. "I can't leave you," I stammered. "Go," Booker roared. The 3 men charged. They didn't pull guns. They pulled telescopic batons. The metal clicked as they snapped open. These weren't street thugs. These were professionals. They were here to break bones and take evidence. Booker didn't wait. He was 65, but he was a Marine. He lunged at the first man, tackling him into a stack of pallets. The wood splintered with a loud crack. The second man swung his baton at Booker's head. Booker ducked, took the hit on his shoulder, and drove a fist into the man's gut. "Run!" Reggie Booker screamed, grappling with 2 of them. I scrambled toward the driver's side of the van. The third man was coming for me. He was fast. He grabbed the back of my jacket and yanked. I slipped in the mud, falling hard onto the asphalt. The evidence bag flew from my hand, sliding across the wet pavement. The man stood over me. He raised the steel baton. "Give it up, old man," he sneered. "Mrs. King sends her regards." He wasn't looking at the bag. He was looking at my knees. He was going to cripple me. Suddenly, a blur of motion slammed into him. It was Booker. He had broken free from the others and thrown his entire body weight into my attacker. They went down in a tangle of limbs. "Get the bag!" Booker yelled, pinning the man's arms. I crawled on my hands and knees. The plastic bag was 5 feet away. I grabbed it. I clutched it to my chest. Behind me, I heard a sickening sound. It was the sound of metal hitting bone, a dry, loud snap that echoed in the alley like a gunshot. Booker let out a howl, a raw, guttural sound of agony. One of the men had recovered and swung his baton with full force into Booker's forearm. I scrambled to my feet. The rage that filled me was blinding. I wanted to kill them, but I looked at Booker. He was on his knees, clutching his dangling arm, his face gray with shock. "Go!" Booker gasped, looking at me with wild eyes. "Don't let them take it." I jumped into the driver's seat of the van. I slammed the door and locked it just as the first man threw himself against the glass. He hammered on the window with the baton. The glass spider-webbed but held. I started the engine. I threw it into reverse. I couldn't leave Booker. I couldn't. But then I saw Booker stand up. He was holding his broken arm with his good hand. He looked at me through the cracked window and nodded. He kicked the man closest to the van, forcing him back, creating a path for me. "Save Nash," he mouthed. I slammed on the gas. The van shot backwards, scraping against the brick wall, sparks flying. I clipped the side of their SUV, tearing the bumper off, and spun around in the street. I looked back in the rearview mirror. The 3 men were circling Booker. He was backing away, still fighting, still standing. I screamed in frustration, a sound that tore my throat. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to run them over. But the evidence bag was burning a hole in my pocket. If I went back, they would take it. They would destroy it. And then Nash would die, and Booker's sacrifice would be for nothing. I drove. I drove through the rain, tears streaming down my face, mixing with the mud and the blood. I drove straight back to the federal building. When I burst into the conference room, Inspector Jenkins stood up. She took one look at me, my torn clothes, the blood on my jacket that wasn't mine, and she knew. "Where is your partner?" she asked softly. I slammed the plastic bag onto the table. "He bought this with his arm," I said, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "He is in the alley behind King Real Estate. Send an ambulance. Send a SWAT team. Send everyone." Jenkins looked at the crumpled receipt in the bag. She saw the handwritten note. She saw the tracking number. She didn't ask any more questions. She hit the red button on the wall. All units, she spoke into the intercom, her voice cold as ice. "We have a confirmed Section 1341 with physical evidence. Violent assault on a federal witness. Suspects are armed and dangerous. Mobilize the tactical team. We are executing a no-knock raid on the sanctuary and the King residence." She looked at me. "Reggie, you stay here. You need a medic." "No," I said. I wiped the tears from my eyes. "I am driving the lead vehicle." Jenkins looked at me for a long moment. She saw the fire in my eyes. She saw the father who had nothing left to lose. "Get him a vest," she ordered her team, "and get him a radio." I walked out to the parking lot where the armored trucks were idling. I thought of Booker alone in that alley. I thought of Nash alone in that room. "Hold on," I whispered to the rain. "The mail is coming, and this time the postage is due." The tactical room inside the federal building was a hive of controlled chaos. Men and women in windbreakers emblazoned with USPS and FBI were loading magazines, checking body cameras, and studying floor plans of my former home. But in the center of the storm, everything was quiet. I sat at a metal table, a secure phone line sitting in front of me like a coiled snake. Inspector Jenkins stood across from me, her headset around her neck, her eyes locked on mine. She didn't say a word. She just nodded. It was time to play the greatest role of my life. For the last 24 hours, I had been a detective, a thief, and a fugitive. But now I had to go back to being exactly what Brittany thought I was. I had to be the defeated, broken, senile old man who had lost everything. I had to sell her the one thing she wanted more than money. I had to sell her my total and unconditional surrender. I took a sip of lukewarm water to wet my throat. Then I let out a long, shaky exhale. I slumped my shoulders. I pictured the look on Booker's face when they broke his arm. I used that pain not to fuel my rage, but to fuel my performance of despair. I picked up the receiver. My hand trembled not from nerves, but because I needed her to hear the fear in my breathing. I dialed the number. 1 ring, 2 rings. Hello? Brittany's voice was sharp, impatient. She sounded like a woman who was busy counting her chickens before they hatched. Brittany, I rasped. It is me. It is Dad. There was a pause. I could hear the background noise on her end, the clinking of silverware soft jazz. She was eating dinner, probably in my dining room. Well, look who it is, she said, her tone dripping with venom. I thought you were halfway to Mexico by now, Reggie. Or maybe in a jail cell. The sheriff is looking for you. He says you assaulted his officers. I didn't assault anyone, I stammered, letting my voice crack. I was scared. They hurt Booker Brittany. They broke his arm. I can't do this anymore. I heard her let out a sigh, a sound of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. I told you not to fight me, Dad. I told you that you were confused. You are sick. You have dementia. You imagine things that aren't there. I closed my eyes. This was the hardest part. Admitting to a lie to catch a liar. Maybe you are right, I whispered. I don't know what is real anymore. I am cold, Brittany. I am sitting in a van in a parking lot, and I have $40 in my pocket. I am tired. I just want it to stop. So turn yourself in, she said coldly. Go to the police station. They will process you for the trespassing charge, and then we can get you into that state facility, the one with the barred windows. I gripped the phone tighter. She was cruel. She wanted to punish me. I will, I said. I will go to the sheriff tonight. I will sign the papers. I will sign the statement saying, I made it all up. I will admit to the dementia diagnosis. I will give you full guardianship over me, just like you have over Nash. I paused, waiting for the bait to settle. I knew exactly how her mind worked. If I signed those papers, if I legally declared myself incompetent and retracted my accusations, she was bulletproof. The photos I took would be dismissed as the fabrications of a madman. The mail fraud investigation would stall without a credible witness. It was the golden ticket she needed to finalize her theft. But I added, my voice trembling. I have one condition. Brittany laughed. You are in no position to make demands, old man. It is not a demand, I pleaded. It is a beg, a dying man's wish. Before I go into the home, before I get locked away, I want to see my son. Absolutely not, she snapped. Nash is in treatment. I know, I said, but I can't say goodbye to him in a hospital. I want to see him at the house, at home, just for an hour. Bring him home. Let me sit with him. Let me apologize to him for causing all this trouble. Then I will sign whatever you put in front of me. I will sign the company transfer. I will sign the house deed. I will sign my life away. I waited. The silence stretched out. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. She didn't care about my feelings. She cared about the logistics. Why at the house, she asked suspiciously. Because that is where his mother died, I lied. Because I want to give him his grandfather's watch. And I hesitated, adding the final sweetener. Because I know you need him to sign the sale documents for the construction firm. You can't do that at the sanctuary, Brittany. You need a notary. You need a lawyer. You can't bring them to a high-security ward without raising questions. But if you bring him home, you can get everything done at once. Hook, line, sinker. She needed that signature. The fake will wasn't enough for the immediate sale of the business assets. She needed Nash to sign the divestment papers in person, and she had been struggling to figure out how to do it without exposing his condition to the corporate lawyers. Bringing him home, drugging him just enough to be compliant but awake, and having me there to bless the transaction as his father. It was the perfect cover. Fine, she said slowly. Tomorrow at noon. No, I said, urgency creeping into my voice. Not tomorrow, tonight. I can't spend another night in this van. My heart is giving out, Brittany. I need to do this now, or I might not make it to the morning. I was pushing her, making her rush. People make mistakes when they rush. Tonight, it is almost 4 a.m., she hissed. Please, I sobbed. Just get him there. I am coming over. I will wait on the porch until you arrive. She was silent for 10 seconds. 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. Inspector Jenkins held up a hand, signaling her team to hold position. Okay, Brittany said. But listen to me, Reggie. Dr. Vance will be there, my lawyer will be there, and the sheriff will be outside. If you try anything at all, I will have you committed to the psych ward before you can blink. You walk in, you say goodbye, you sign the confession, and you leave in a police car. Deal, I whispered. Thank you, Brittany. You are a good girl. I hung up the phone. The room was silent. I stared at the black plastic of the receiver. I felt dirty. I felt sick. I had just begged the woman who tortured my son for mercy. I had played the role of the weak, broken victim so well that I almost believed it myself. Then I looked up. Inspector Jenkins was smiling. It was a small, tight, dangerous smile. She bought it, Jenkins asked. She bought it, I said, my voice dropping back to its normal steel-hard register. She is bringing everyone. Nash, Dr. Vance, the lawyer. And she admits the sheriff will be on the perimeter. Jenkins turned to the room. Her voice boomed with authority. All right, people, you heard the man. The suspect is moving the high-value target to the primary location. We have a confirmed gathering of all co-conspirators at the King residence in 45 minutes. She turned to the tactical map. I want surveillance drones up in 10 minutes. I want the perimeter established 3 blocks out. No lights, no sirens. We go in dark. We wait for the signal. What is the signal? A SWAT leader asked. Jenkins looked at me. Reggie is the signal, she said. He is going to walk through that front door. He is going to get eyes on the victim. And when he gives the word, we bring the house down. She handed me a small black earpiece. Put this in Reggie. It is a wire. We will hear everything. If she hurts him, if she threatens you, we breach. But we need you to get her to admit it. We need her to say it out loud while the lawyer is there. We need to bury her under a mountain of evidence so deep she never sees the sun again. I put the earpiece in my ear. It was cold. I stood up and buttoned my torn delivery jacket. I wasn't just a postmaster anymore. I was the bait. I was the Trojan horse. One last thing, Jenkins said, handing me a bulletproof vest to wear under my shirt. She thinks you are broken. She thinks you are senile. Do not break character until the trap is sprung. I nodded. Don't worry, Inspector, I said, checking my reflection in the dark glass of the window. My eyes looked tired, but they burned with a fire that hadn't been there in years. I know exactly who I am. I am the man who is going to deliver the final notice. I walked out of the federal building and into the armored SUV waiting at the curb. The rain had stopped. The city was quiet. But inside my chest a storm was raging. Brittany thought she had won. She thought she was coming to collect her prize. She didn't know she was walking into a funeral, and this time it was going to be hers. The rain had stopped leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the storm. I stood on the sidewalk across from the house that I had bought 30 years ago. It used to be a home. It used to have a red door and a porch swing where Clara would sit and watch the neighbors go by. Now, under the harsh glare of the streetlights, it looked like a mausoleum. Brittany had painted the door a sleek, soulless black. The porch swing was gone, replaced by abstract metal sculptures that looked like jagged teeth. I adjusted the collar of my jacket. Underneath the wet fabric, the Kevlar vest was tight against my chest, a constant reminder that this wasn't a family reunion. It was a tactical operation. I touched the small earpiece in my right ear, ensuring it was secure. Copy that, Reggie. Inspector Jenkins's voice whispered in my ear, clear as a bell. We have eyes on the perimeter. The drone is holding position. Sheriff Miller is parked in the driveway. He is your doorman. Remember the objective. Get them to say it. Get them to admit the coercion. Do not engage until you give the signal. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold night air. I slumped my shoulders. I let my jaw go slack. I shuffled my feet. I wasn't Reginald King, the man who had just led a federal chase through the city. I was Reggie, the confused, broken old man who had come to surrender. I walked up the driveway. Sheriff Miller was leaning against his cruiser, arms crossed over his chest. He watched me approach with a look of bored contempt. You made the right choice, Reggie, he said as I got close. His voice was loud, performing for the neighbors. Just go in there, sign the papers, and let's get this over with. I have a shift to finish. I didn't look him in the eye. I looked at my shoes. I just want to see my son, Jim, I mumbled, adding a slight tremor to my voice. I just want to see Nash. Go inside, Miller grunted, jerking his thumb toward the door. They are waiting in the study. I climbed the porch steps. My hand hovered over the doorknob. This was the door I had carried my wife through. This was the door Nash had run out of on his prom night. Now it felt like the hatch of a submarine sealing me in with the sharks. I opened it. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of Clara's potpourri anymore. It was the smell of expensive leather, stale cigar smoke, and that distinct sharp scent of ozone that comes from too many electronics. I walked down the hallway. My boots left muddy prints on the pristine hardwood floor. I didn't care. In the study, the scene was set like a Renaissance painting of a betrayal. Brittany sat behind my old mahogany desk, Nash's desk now looking like a queen on a throne. She was wearing a silk blouse and holding a glass of amber liquid. To her right stood Dr. Vance, looking smug in a tailored suit, his hand resting possessively on the back of Brittany's chair. To her left was a man I didn't know, a lawyer with a sharkskin suit and eyes that scanned me like I was a liability on a spreadsheet. And there in the corner, slumped in a wheelchair that looked too small for him, was Nash. My heart stopped. He was awake, but barely. His head lolled to one side. He was wearing a fresh shirt that was 2 sizes too big for his emaciated frame, probably put on him 10 minutes ago to hide the bruises. His hands were resting in his lap, twitching rhythmically. "Nash," I whispered. I shuffled forward, reaching out a trembling hand. Brittany slammed her glass down on the coaster. "Stay there, Dad," she commanded. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the room. "Don't touch him. You are agitated. We don't want to upset the patient." I stopped. I looked at Nash. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes found mine. They were glassy, swimming in a chemical fog, but there was a flicker of recognition. "Dad," he croaked. I looked at Brittany. I let the tears that had been threatening to fall all night finally spill over. "What did you do to him?" I asked, making sure to speak clearly for the microphone. He looks half dead, Brittany. Why can't he walk?" Dr. Vance stepped forward, smoothing his tie. He spoke with that oily, condescending tone doctors use when they are explaining why they killed your family member. "It is the medication," Mr. King Vance said. "Thorazine and a sedative cocktail to manage his violent outbursts. He is perfectly safe. He is just relaxed." "Relaxed." I repeated, my voice rising just enough to sound hysterical but not threatening. "He is drooling, doctor. You have him drugged out of his mind. How can he sign legal papers like this?" Brittany laughed. It was a cruel, icy sound. "He doesn't need to do calculus, Reggie. He just needs to hold a pen. That is what the good doctor is here for, to verify that he is lucid enough to understand the transaction." She gestured to the lawyer. "This is Mr. Henderson. He has prepared the documents. The transfer of the construction company to my holding firm, the sale of the lake house, and, of course, your voluntary commitment papers." She slid a stack of documents across the desk. "We are doing this all at once," she said. "A clean sweep. You sign your rights away. Nash signs his assets away. And then we all live happily ever after. Or at least I do." I looked at the lawyer. "You are okay with this?" I asked him. "You see a man who can barely keep his head up and you are going to let him sign over a $5 million company." Henderson shrugged. He didn't look at Nash. He looked at his watch. "I have a notarized medical evaluation from Dr. Vance stating Mr. King is competent," he said, flatly. "And I have your son's power of attorney. This is just a formality to satisfy the board of directors. Are we doing this or not?" I looked back at Nash. I needed more. I needed them to admit the threat. "Nash," I said, taking a step closer. "Son, do you want to do this? Do you want to give her the company?" Nash looked at Brittany. I saw him flinch. It was a tiny movement, but it spoke volumes. He was terrified of her. She said, Nash mumbled his words, slurring. "She said the IRS, the audit." Brittany rolled her eyes. She stood up and walked over to the wheelchair. She put her hand on Nash's shoulder. It looked like a caress, but I saw her thumb dig into his collarbone. A pressure point. "Honey," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We talked about this. There is no audit if you sign. I take care of the taxes. I take care of your dad. Remember, if you don't sign, well, Dad has to go to that bad place. The one with the bars." She looked at me and smiled. "Tell him, Reggie. Tell him you want him to sign so you can be safe." I felt the blood boiling in my veins. The earpiece buzzed. "We have it," Jenkins' voice said. "That is coercion. That is extortion. We have the doctor, the lawyer, and the wife. We are good to go, Reggie. Give the signal." But I wasn't done. I wanted one more thing. I wanted her to admit the endgame. And after he signs, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What happens to Nash? Does he come home? Brittany looked at me with genuine pity. Oh, Reggie, you really are senile. Nash can't come home. He is sick. He is going back to the sanctuary. Tonight. And then I pressed. How long does he stay there? She leaned in close so only I and Nash and the federal agents listening could hear. Until nature takes its course. Dad, the doctor says his heart is very weak. These things, they happen. It is a tragedy, really. But I will look great in black. She straightened up and clapped her hands. All right, show time. She grabbed a gold fountain pen from the desk. She walked over to Nash and jammed it into his trembling hand. Sign here, baby, she said, pointing to the bottom of the document, right next to the X. Nash looked at the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the tip was tapping against the paper, leaving little dots of ink. He looked at me. His eyes were begging for help. He was trapped. If he didn't sign, he thought I would go to jail. If he did sign, he was signing his own death warrant. Dad, he whispered. I looked at Brittany. She was glowing with triumph. She had won. She had beaten the system. She had beaten the family. I looked at Dr. Vance. He was checking his phone board. I looked at the lawyer. He was capping his own pen, ready to notarize the theft. I took a deep breath. I stood up straighter. The slump in my shoulders disappeared. The slackness in my jaw vanished. The fog in my eyes cleared, replaced by the cold, hard steel of a man who had walked through hell and come out the other side with a flamethrower. I looked at the earpiece. Did you get all that, Inspector? I said clearly. The room froze. Brittany frowned. What? Who are you talking to? I didn't answer her. I looked at Nash. Drop the pen, son, I said. My voice wasn't the voice of an old man anymore. It was the voice of the postmaster. Brittany looked confused. She looked at my ear. She saw the wire. Her face went pale. What is that? She screamed. What is in your ear? I smiled. It was the first real smile I had smiled in 2 years. It is a delivery notification, Brittany, I said. Suddenly the front window shattered. A flashbang grenade rolled into the center of the room. Brittany screamed. Dr. Vance dove behind the desk. The grenade detonated with a blinding flash and a deafening boom that shook the house to its foundations. Before the ringing in their ears could stop the front door, the black door she had painted to shut me out was kicked off its hinges. Federal agents. Get down. Get down. Men in tactical gear poured into the hallway like a flood. Red laser sights cut through the smoke, dancing across the expensive suits and the silk blouse. I didn't flinch. I walked through the chaos. I walked past the lawyer who was cowering on the floor with his hands on his head. I walked past Dr. Vance, who was being zip-tied by an agent. I walked past Brittany, who was being pressed against the wall, screaming, demanding to call the sheriff. I walked straight to the wheelchair. Nash was covering his head, terrified. I reached down and gently pulled his hands away. I took the gold pen from his fingers and threw it across the room. It is over, Nash, I said, untying the restraints on the wheelchair. I told you. The mailman always delivers. I looked back at Brittany. An agent was reading her rights. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock and hatred. You old fool, she screamed. You can't do this. I own this house. I looked at her. I touched the badge in my pocket. Return to sender, I said. And then I turned my back on her, focusing only on the son I had come to save. The war was over. The cleanup was just beginning. The gold nib of the fountain pen hovered over the signature line, shaking violently in Nash's grip. A single drop of ink fell from the tip, blooming like a black flower on the white paper that would strip my son of his entire life's work. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the hard drive in the computer and the ragged, shallow breathing of my son. Brittany was leaning forward, her eyes wide and predatory, practically vibrating with greed. The lawyer checked his watch. Dr. Vance smoothed his silk tie. They were bored. To them, this was just paperwork. To me, it was an execution. I stood 5 feet away, my hands resting on the handle of my old wooden cane. I let my posture remain stooped for just a moment longer. I watched Brittany's smile widen as the pen tip touched the paper again. She thought she had won. She thought the old mailman was defeated, that the sheriff outside was her personal guard dog, and that the world belonged to those who took what they wanted. Wait, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor blade. It didn't crack. It didn't tremble. It was the voice I used to use when I addressed the entire sorting floor during the Christmas rush. Brittany snapped her head up, annoyance flashing across her face. "What is it now, Reggie? Let him sign so we can get you to your room." I took a slow step forward. I didn't look at Nash. I looked straight at her. "Before he signs that, Brittany, I have a question. A professional question." She rolled her eyes and let out a huff of air. "Make it quick. Do you know the current federal sentencing guidelines for Title 18 United States Code Section 1341? Brittany blinked. The lawyer frowned and looked up from his briefcase. Dr. Vance stopped checking his cuticles. What? Brittany laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "You are reciting postal codes now. Is this part of your dementia, Dad?" I didn't smile. I didn't blink. Section 1341. I repeated, my voice dropping an octave, becoming cold and hard as iron. "It covers mail fraud. It states that anyone who uses the United States Postal Service to facilitate a scheme to defraud or to obtain money by false pretenses faces up to 20 years in federal prison, per count." The lawyer froze. He was the first one to realize the tone of the room had changed. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw that the confusion was gone from my eyes. "Reggie, what are you talking about?" Brittany sneered. "You are babbling." I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a tissue. I pulled out the crumpled thermal receipt I had found in her trash, the one with her handwriting on the back. "You mailed the fake insurance claims to Hartford, Brittany," I said, holding the paper up. "You mailed the fraudulent medical reports to the partners in Chicago. You mailed the new will to your attorney. You thought the mail was just a way to move paper. You forgot that the mail leaves a trail, and you forgot who spent 40 years learning how to follow that trail." Brittany stood up, her face flushing red. "Sheriff!" she screamed toward the door. "Sheriff Miller. Get him out of here." The sheriff didn't come. I took one more step. I raised my heavy wooden cane 3 inches off the floor. "You bought the sheriff, Brittany. You bought the doctor. You even bought the silence of the neighbors. But you made one fatal mistake." I slammed the cane down onto the hardwood floor. Thud. The sound was sharp and definitive. It was the sound of a gavel coming down. "You messed with the federal government." For 1 second there was absolute silence. Then the world exploded. The front window of the study shattered inward in a shower of diamond-like glass. A flashbang grenade rolled across the Persian rug and detonated with a blinding white light and a concussive boom that rattled the fillings in my teeth. Brittany screamed, covering her ears. Dr. Vance dove behind the heavy oak desk. The lawyer threw his briefcase in the air and scrambled backward. Before the smoke could even clear the front door, the door Sheriff Miller was supposed to be guarding was kicked off its hinges with a force that splintered the frame. "Federal agents, get down. Hands in the air." It wasn't the beige uniforms of the sheriff's department. It was a sea of navy blue windbreakers. USPIS, FBI, tactical teams with rifles raised pouring into the hallway like a tidal wave of justice. Postal Inspection Service. "Nobody move." Red laser sights danced across the room, cutting through the haze. They landed on the lawyer's chest. They landed on Dr. Vance's forehead. They landed on Brittany, who was standing frozen, her mouth open in a silent scream of disbelief. I stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, the eye of the storm. An agent moved past me, clapping a hand on my shoulder for a split second, a silent acknowledgement before moving to secure the targets. I watched as 3 agents swarmed Dr. Vance. They didn't ask him nicely. They dragged him out from behind the desk and slammed him face first onto the floor. "Alexander Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, medical fraud, and the distribution of controlled substances." Brittany was backing away, shaking her head. "No," she stammered. "No, this is a mistake. Sheriff Jim, help me." She looked toward the door, expecting her friend, her accomplice, to save her. Sheriff Miller did walk in, but he wasn't coming to save her. He was being walked in by 2 federal agents. His gun belt was gone, his badge was gone, and his hands were cuffed behind his back. He looked at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. I walked over to Brittany. The agents held their fire, letting me have the floor. I wasn't the frail old man anymore. I was the accuser. "Miller can't help you," I said calmly, looking down at her terrified face. "His jurisdiction ends at the county line. But mail fraud, that crosses every line on the map. You, You set me up, she hissed, her eyes darting around the room looking for an escape that didn't exist. I didn't set you up, I said. I just delivered the message. An agent stepped forward, pulling Brittany's arms behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was louder than the explosion. It was the sound of freedom. Brittany King, you are under arrest for 18 counts of mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, the agent recited. I turned away from her. She was screaming now, shouting threats, shouting about her lawyers, but she was noise. She was history. I walked to the wheelchair. Nash was sitting there, covered in glass dust, still clutching the pen, but he wasn't shaking anymore. He was staring at me. His eyes were wide, the drug-induced fog momentarily pierced by the shock of the raid. "Dad," he whispered. I reached down and gently took the pen from his fingers. I capped it. I put it in my pocket. "It is over, son," I said softly. I looked over at Dr. Vance, who was being hauled to his feet, blood trickling from his nose where it had hit the floor. "And you," I said, pointing a finger at him. The room went quiet again. The agents paused. "You are the worst of them all. You took an oath to do no harm. And you kept my son in a chemical prison for 2 years. Vance spat at the floor. He was psychotic. He sneered. I was treating him. I walked up to him. I was inches from his face. I saw the charts, Vance. I have the photos. You were prescribing Thorazine and haloperidol to a man with no history of psychosis just to keep him compliant. That isn't treatment. That is chemical restraint. That is torture. And when the medical board sees the evidence I have in my pocket, you won't just lose your license. You will lose your freedom for the rest of your natural life. Get him out of my sight, I ordered the agents. They dragged him away. I turned back to Nash. An EMT team was already entering the room, pushing past the tactical gear. They were my people too, federal medics. I knelt down beside the wheelchair. I took Nash's cold hand in mine. "I told you," I whispered, wiping a smudge of soot from his cheek. "I told you I would bring the Marines." Nash looked at the agents, then at Brittany being led away in cuffs, weeping and thrashing. Then he looked at me. Tears welled up in his eyes, washing away the dullness. "You did it," he choked out. "You really did it. We did it," I corrected him. "You stayed alive. That was the hard part. Now comes the easy part. We go home." "Not this home," I added, looking around the room that smelled of betrayal. "Our home." Inspector Jenkins walked in. She had her gun holstered now. She looked at me and nodded. "Secure," she said. "We have the hard drives, we have the signed confessions from the lawyer, and we have the mail receipts. It is a slam dunk, Reggie. They are never getting out." She looked at the cane in my hand. "Nice signal," she smiled. "Very dramatic." I leaned on the cane, feeling the exhaustion finally beginning to creep back in. "I wanted to make sure they heard it," I said. I watched them load Brittany into the back of a black SUV through the broken window. She saw me watching. She stopped struggling for a second. Our eyes locked. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood there, the father who had protected his cub. She had underestimated the one thing you never underestimate. She thought I was just an old man who moved letters. She forgot that the postman knows every street, every shortcut, and every hiding place. And when the postman comes to collect you, better have paid your dues. "Let's go," I said to the medics. "Get my son out of this chair. He has some walking to do." The sound of victory is not a trumpet. It is the metallic click of handcuffs tightening around the wrists of people who thought they were untouchable. I stood in the center of my living room, leaning on my cane, watching the house of cards collapse. The flashbang had left a ringing in my ears, but through the haze I could hear the distinct shrill sound of Brittany screaming. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage. She had lunged for the desk the moment the agents breached the door. Even with laser sights painted on her chest, her greed was faster than her survival instinct. She grabbed the stack of transfer documents, the ones Nash had almost signed, and began tearing them into confetti. Her manicured nails clawed at the paper, ripping through the legal jargon, the asset lists, and the fake will. She threw the pieces into the air, her face twisted into a mask of hatred. "You have nothing," she shrieked, spitting at the nearest agent. "It is just paper. I destroyed it." "You have no proof," I watched her with a calm detachment. It was pitiful. She was a modern criminal trying to use analog destruction in a digital world. Inspector Jenkins stepped over the scattered debris. She didn't even look down at the torn paper. She looked at Brittany with the bored expression of a woman who had taken down cartels and syndicates. Mrs. King Jenkins said, her voice cutting through Brittany's hysteria. We don't need those papers. We have the metadata from your printer. We have the server logs from your lawyer's cloud storage. And most importantly, we have the forensic imaging of the envelopes you mailed. You can tear up every piece of paper in this house, but you cannot delete the United States mail trail. Brittany froze. The reality of her situation hit her like a physical blow. She realized that while she was playing checkers with the local sheriff, we had been playing three-dimensional chess with the federal government. Speaking of the sheriff, the front door opened again. 2 agents walked in, escorting Jim Miller. But Jim wasn't walking with his usual swagger. His shoulders were slumped. His badge had been stripped from his chest. His hands were cuffed behind his back with heavy plastic zip ties. He looked up and saw me. For a moment his eyes flashed with anger, but it quickly dissolved into shame. He looked away, focusing on the floorboards. "Reggie, listen," Miller stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I didn't know about the drugs. I thought it was a legitimate medical case." She showed me the papers. "I was just following procedure." I walked over to him. I stopped right in front of him, invading his personal space. I smelled the fear on him. "You weren't following procedure, Jim," I said quietly. "You were following the money. You knew she emptied my accounts. You knew she changed the locks. And when I came to you with photos of a man being tortured, you threatened to arrest me. That isn't negligence. That is complicity." Miller opened his mouth to argue, but Jenkins stepped in. "Save it for the indictment, ex-sheriff," she said. "You are facing charges for obstruction of justice, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and accessory to kidnapping. Take him away." I watched as they marched Miller out the door past the neighbors who were now gathering on the sidewalk, watching the fall of the man who was supposed to protect them. But my work wasn't done. I turned my attention to the corner of the room where the EMTs were assessing Nash. He was still in the wheelchair, but he was sitting up straighter now. The shock of the explosion seemed to have jolted his system, fighting back the fog of the sedatives. An EMT was checking his pupils with a penlight. Nash looked around the room, his eyes darting from the shattered window to the handcuffed lawyer, and finally landing on me. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was raw, unused. I walked over to him. I knelt down, ignoring the pain in my bad knee. I took his hand. It was trembling, cold, and clammy, but it was alive. "I am here, son," I said. "It is over." Nash squeezed my hand. A weak, desperate grip. Tears began to spill from his eyes, carving tracks through the grime on his face. I thought you left," he choked out. "When you jumped down the chute, I thought you left me there to die." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I would never leave you, Nash. I just had to go get the cavalry. A delivery man never abandons a package. He just finds a better route." He looked at Brittany, who was now being pressed against the wall by 2 female agents getting patted down for weapons. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had loved, the woman who had turned his life into a horror movie. "She told me you were dead," Dad, Nash sobbed. "Last month. She told me you had a stroke and died in a state home. She said I missed the funeral. That is why I stopped fighting. I thought I had nothing left to live for." I felt a surge of rage, so hot it almost blinded me. Telling him I was dead, it was the ultimate cruelty. She had severed his hope to break his will. "Look at me," I said, gripping his shoulders. "I am right here. I am alive, and I am not going anywhere. We are going to get you clean. We are going to get you healthy, and we are going to rebuild." Nash nodded, burying his face in my shoulder, weeping like a child. I held him, rocking him slightly, feeling the bones of his spine through the thin shirt. He was so thin. But bones heal. Flesh returns. As long as the heart is beating, there is a way back. Reggie Jenkins called out, "We are moving the primary suspect." I stood up. I wiped my eyes. I turned to face the door. They were walking Brittany out. Her hair was messy, her silk blouse was torn at the shoulder, and her mascara was running down her face. She looked like a ruin. But as she passed me, she stopped. She dug her heels into the floor, forcing the agents to pause. She looked at me with eyes that were black holes of malice. "You think you won?" she spat. "This house is still in my name. The deed is recorded. The LLC owns it. You can arrest me, but you will be tied up in probate court for 10 years. You will be dead before you ever step foot in this house legally." She smiled. A twisted, broken smile. "I still have the keys, old man, and possession is 9/10 of the law." I looked at her. I looked at the agents holding her arms. "Hold on a second," I said to them. The agents looked at Jenkins. Jenkins nodded. I stepped closer to Brittany. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The monster had lost its teeth. "You are right about one thing, Brittany," I said calmly. "Possession is important." I reached out. I didn't ask for permission. I reached into the pocket of her designer slacks. She tried to pull away, snapping her teeth at my hand like a cornered rat, but the agents held her firm. My hand closed around the cold metal of a key ring. I pulled it out. It was my key ring. The one with the little brass mailbox charm that Nash had given me for Father's Day 10 years ago. The keys she had taken from me the night she threw me out into the rain. The keys to the front door, the back door, and the garage where I kept my tools. I held them up, letting them jingle in the silence of the room. "You forgot something," I said, my voice low and steady. "This isn't just a house. It is a federal crime scene. And under the civil asset forfeiture laws, any property used to facilitate a federal felony is subject to immediate seizure." Brittany's eyes went wide. The color drained from her face. "That means the government owns it now," I continued. "And since I am the cooperating witness and the original title holder, Inspector Jenkins has authorized me to act as the custodian of the property until the trial is over." I looked at Jenkins. She gave me a small, sharp salute. "That is correct," Mr. King Jenkins said. "The suspect is to be removed from the premises immediately. She has no legal standing here." I turned back to Brittany. I leaned in close so she could smell the old man soap and the hard work on my clothes. "You stole my money. You stole my son. You tried to steal my dignity. But you forgot the first rule of the post office, Brittany." I dropped the keys into my own pocket. "You never tamper with the mail, because the penalty is absolute." I turned to the agents holding her. "Get this trash off my porch, gentlemen," Brittany screamed. She lunged at me, but the agents dragged her back. She was shouting obscenities, cursing my name, cursing Nash, cursing the world. They hauled her out the door, her heels dragging on the floorboards, leaving scuff marks that I would sand out tomorrow. I watched them shove her into the back of the armored SUV. I watched the heavy door slam shut, sealing her in a cage of steel and glass, a cage much smaller and much colder than the one she had built for Nash. The sirens wailed as the convoy pulled away. The neighbors stood on their lawns silent, watching the procession. I turned back to the room. It was a mess. Broken glass, torn paper, mud on the floor. But it was my mess. I walked over to the wheelchair. I grabbed the handles. "Ready to go, son?" I asked. Nash looked up at me. He looked at the empty doorway where his wife had just vanished. He took a deep, shuddering breath. For the first time in 2 years, he wasn't breathing recycled air. He was breathing freedom. "Where are we going, Dad?" "To the hospital." "Eventually," I said. "But first," I pushed the wheelchair toward the front door. I pushed him out onto the porch. The night air was cool and crisp. The stars were coming out. "First, we are going to sit on the porch. I am going to make us some tea. And we are going to watch the sunrise. Just you and me." I looked at the keys in my hand. I felt the weight of them. They weren't just metal. They were the keys to a second chance. I sat down on the top step, resting my cane against the railing. Nash sat in his chair beside me. We didn't say anything. We didn't have to. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I put my arm around my son's shoulders. "Welcome home, Nash," I whispered. And as the first light of dawn began to touch the rooftops of the neighborhood, I knew that the long delivery route was finally over. The package was safe. The job was done. And for the first time in a long time, the postmaster could finally rest. The smell of hickory smoke and barbecue sauce is the best smell in the world. It is the smell of summer, the smell of peace, and most importantly, the smell of a home that has been reclaimed. I sat in my backyard in a lawn chair that I had repaired myself, watching the smoke rise from the grill. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in a delivery van, shivering in the rain, wondering if my son was going to die in a chemical prison. Today, the only thing burning was the charcoal, and the only thing being delivered was a rack of ribs to a paper plate. I watched Nash flipping the meat. He looked different. The gray skeletal pallor of the addict was gone, replaced by the rich, healthy glow of a man who had spent the last half-year fighting for his life in a real gym, not a fake clinic. He had gained 30 pounds of muscle. His eyes, which used to be swimming in a fog of Thorazine, were sharp and clear. He was laughing at something Booker said. Booker was sitting next to me, nursing a cold beer with his good hand. His left arm was out of the cast, but he still had a stiff range of motion where the baton had shattered the bone. He didn't complain. He wore that stiffness like a medal of honor. He had traded a piece of his arm for my son's life, and every time Nash laughed, Booker smiled like he had made the best trade in the history of Wall Street. It took 3 months for the federal prosecutors to finish dismantling Brittany's empire. They didn't just find the mail fraud. Once they cracked the hard drives from her office, they found everything. Shell companies, money laundering, tax evasion, and 3 other elderly victims she had swindled before she met Nash. She tried to cut a deal. She offered to turn on Dr. Vance. But the feds didn't need her help. They had my photos. They had the receipts. Brittany is currently serving the first year of a 20-year sentence in a federal correctional facility in West Virginia. I heard she works in the laundry room. I hope she appreciates the irony. Nash walked over to us carrying a platter of food. He walked with a confident stride. No wheelchair, no shuffling. "Eat up, old-timers," Nash teased, placing the tray on the picnic table. I made the sauce from scratch, no store-bought stuff. He sat down opposite me. He looked at the house, my house. We had spent weeks scrubbing the black paint off the front door, restoring it to the original red oak. We had ripped out the jagged metal sculptures and put the porch swing back. "Dad," Nash said, his voice turning serious, "I wanted to talk to you." I put down my rib. Here it comes, I thought. "I closed on the new condo downtown yesterday," Nash said. "The penthouse. It has 3 bedrooms, a wraparound terrace, a private elevator." He leaned forward. "I want you to move in with me, Dad. There is plenty of space. You and Booker. You shouldn't be living here alone. After everything that happened, I want to take care of you. I want to make sure you are safe." I looked at my son. I saw the love in his eyes. I saw the guilt, too. He felt like he owed me a debt that could never be repaid. He wanted to wrap me in cotton wool just like I had tried to wrap him when he was a boy. I looked at Booker. Booker just shrugged, taking a bite of corn. He knew what I was going to say. "Nash," I said gently, "that is a generous offer." But Nash asked. "But no," I said. Nash looked hurt. "Dad, please. I have the money now. The company is back on track. I recovered most of the stolen assets. Let me do this for you." "Son," I said, wiping my hands on a napkin, "you are missing the point. I didn't break you out of that prison so you could build another one for me." I stood up and walked over to the garden bed. The tomatoes were coming in nicely. "I spent 40 years working, Nash. I spent my whole life being a father, a husband, a postmaster. I defined myself by who I took care of. But these last 6 months living here, fixing this house with my own hands. This is the first time I have been just Reggie." I turned back to him. "I love you, son, but I don't want to live in a penthouse. I don't want a private elevator. I want my garden. I want my neighbors. I want to sit on my porch and watch the world go by. I fought for my independence just as hard as I fought for yours. Don't take that away from me." Nash was silent for a long time. He looked at the house, really looked at it. He saw the pride in the fresh paint. He saw the dignity in the well-kept lawn. He stood up and walked over to me. He was taller than me now. He didn't look like the boy I had to save. He looked like the man I always hoped he would become. "You are a stubborn old man," Reginald King Nash smiled, his eyes wet. "And you are a successful CEO who burns the corn," I retorted, pointing at the blackened cob on Booker's plate. Nash laughed. He pulled me into a hug. It wasn't a desperate cling like the one in the hospital. It was a strong, equal embrace between 2 men who had walked through the fire and survived. "Okay, Dad," Nash said, pulling away. "You stay here. But I am coming for dinner every Sunday. And Booker comes too." "I can live with that," Booker called out, "as long as you don't cook the corn next time." The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard. The nightmare of the last 2 years felt like a distant memory, a story that happened to someone else. Brittany was gone. The drugs were gone. The fear was gone. I sat back in my chair and watched my son and my best friend bickering over the barbecue sauce recipe. I felt the weight of the house keys in my pocket. They were cold, solid, and real. I had learned a lot of things in my 71 years. I learned how to sort mail. I learned how to track a package. I learned how to break into a high-security ward. But the most important thing I learned was that you can't protect the people you love by keeping them in a bubble. Sometimes you have to let them break, and sometimes you have to break the world to get them back. But once the fight is over, you have to know when to put down the sword and pick up the spatula. I took a sip of my iced tea. It was sweet, cold, and perfect. I am Reggie King. I am a father. I am a survivor. and I am finally truly home. We spend our lives teaching our children to walk, but sometimes the hardest lesson is teaching them when to walk away. I thought my job as a father was done when Nash left home. I was wrong. Being a parent isn't just about raising a child. It's about being the lighthouse that stands firm when their storm hits. Evil often wears a beautiful mask and speaks with a sweet voice, but truth is usually silent, waiting for someone brave enough to dig it up. Don't just trust, verify. Because sometimes the person traveling overseas is actually trapped in a prison built by the one sleeping next to them. If this story touched your heart, or if you have ever had to fight for a family member against all odds, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share these stories with the world. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a gut feeling that saved someone you love? I want to hear your story. Until next time, stay safe, keep your eyes open, and remember to check on your loved ones.